Oh. All right, we are now live here at the Streaming Evilive show. Welcome to the Streaming Evilive show. My name is Jeffrey Murdergram, and I'm here with Greg Fasolino. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Oh man, I am stoked to have you here. This is kind of like we've kind of been doing. It's like a trilogy, I guess. This is the Return of the Jedi. Man, we did the Misfits. We did the Misfits thing, and then we did the Danzig thing, and now here we are. And I just feel like it wouldn't have been complete if we didn't get you on the show to talk about those recordings, talk about like a ton of stuff. But first, first let me just get through a few announcements. Or you know what? Maybe I'll wait a little bit. We'll do an intro break. Let's get the engine firing real quick. Do you remember where we met, when we met initially? Because we have met.
Yes, it was summer of 2010. And my dear old friend Joe Truck Casher, who I hadn't seen at that point in a long time, at least a decade, maybe more. And he was in town from California, where he lives now, and suggested that we get together for some drinks, hang out, shoot the just go over old times. And then he said, there's this dude Jeff who's like doing this Misfits documentary. He's interested in talking to anyone who was around at the time and into this. And that's I came down to the bar, and that's when I met you.
That's right. Yeah, we were, and there were. Do you remember the other? Here's, and this is not a test. I'm not trying to test you at all. I'm just curious to see if you do. You remember there were some other members of bands from around that time. I believe there was one band in particular. I don't know. And that's where, and Joe had taken his picture either there at the bar or was just hanging out with that guy.
You're right. Unfortunately, I don't remember who it was. He would remember, but I don't.
It was a band called Milk and Cookies, or Jay and the Boyfriends or something. And it was one of the musicians.
Okay.
That's what I remember, at least.
I remember meeting him, but I don't remember much else about it.
Right. And yeah, right. And I had met Joe. I've kind of explained this already, but I had met Joe. I forget how I met Joe. I met him through the internet, through Facebook, whatever. Joe came out to the East Coast. He was doing his photo book, and he didn't have a car. I had a car, and he was like, he knew I was, trying to get people for my thing. And, even though it was so unrelated to what I was doing, but I sort of, with some coercion from Joe, decided that I needed to tape a Billy Rath interview, which is, I'm really glad that I did, because Billy Rath is gone. He's departed. And there, as far as I know, there are no long form Billy Rath interviews. I might have the only one in existence. So for that history, as you being the prime archivist, and here's the thing, people, about Greg, you have to understand. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, let me redundantly explain this again. I love how I was laughing because Greg said the summer of 2010, because Greg's entire life, I don't want to get personal into Greg's business, but if you are connected networked with Greg, he's constantly uploading photos throughout the different years of his life, and it's minutia. It's just pure minutia. It's his history. It's important to him. But for anybody else who would really, I don't know what does it really matter to anybody else? But I just have such an appreciation. I have such an appreciation for the second half of 1974, or like the first half of 1979. And here's a receipt from when I went to Bleecker Bob's Records to get this record. Just all this stuff, I appreciate it. I appreciate I appreciate and respect the archival properties of, sort of documenting one's life. And I don't think that there's anything, it's just about, caring about your history and wanting to preserve it in some way, shape, or form. I have stacks and stacks of DV tapes, and I do all sorts of stuff, and I'm actually digitizing a bunch of stuff right now. So, it's just like, I just think it's really great. And I always get a kick out of whenever I see some random album. And much like The Simpsons, Greg, are you familiar with The Simpsons?
Of course.
Okay, so you're kind of like Dr. Hubbard a little bit in the sense of, besides not, well, except for the fact that he's a black guy, you're a white guy. It's just that like the hairstyles always change in Greg's photos, just like in The Simpsons when it flashes back and Dr. Hubbard has like a big afro because it's the 70s. Greg has like in the 80s, he's like into this goth phase. So he's got the whole goth thing. He's got like you don't even have to look at the year to know. You just have to look at Greg's head to know what year you're
some of those hairstyles were better than others, but
yeah. Yeah, but I mean that's super. But that's just what's so great. It's just all that stuff is really, really great, and you really got. I mean, when you consider things, you were born in You're 20 years older than me. You were born in I think, right? You're 65.
65, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm 85. You were born at a primo time where you really got a slice of music history by way of New York City. I mean, really, truly. Like if you think about it and your connection to through journalism and music and going to clubs and shows and being involved in the scenes themselves, like all from the late 70s, right? I mean, a little bit in terms of like exposure, like,
sure.
All the way up to, actually going out to shows in the 80s and being there and taping shows and getting this demo this way, which we're going to talk about. I'm going to ask you a lot about some of that into the 90s and so forth. And you're a musician in your own right as well. You've done your music is typically in the post-punk sort of death rock gothic vein of some sort.
In terms of recent stuff, yeah. I mean, I started out in a punk band back in 1981. It was like my first little band. But yeah, after that, I went through sort of a little bit of post-punk, goth, noise rock, different kinds of things. Now I'm doing stuff that's sort of a little more dreamy, but I like playing everything. So
nice. Yeah. So before we go back, tell me I didn't know you were still making music today. What is it exactly that you're doing right now?
I play guitar in a group called The Harrow.
Oh yeah, The Harrow. Okay, yeah.
We had put out an album in 2015, and then sort of went on sabbatical for a bunch of years. But we have a new single that just came out on New Year's Day, and we're making. We have a new lineup and just doing some new things with it, which is fun.
That's great. That's really, really great. So you started off doing. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we can dissect this. Well, let's go to the Misfits stuff first, because that's what the show is, Misfits themed, right? So you were an original member of the Fiend Club. How did you first? Well, I know the answer already, but we'll just go through it. How did you first get exposed to the music of the Misfits?
That's a great question. Before 1981, I was mainly into like hard rock and metal and stuff like that when I was a teenager. My first concerts were like Queen and Kiss, Aerosmith, stuff like that. In the summer of 1981, I was getting just a little bored, and I decided, let me try getting into punk. And at the time, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but back then it was like you were either into like rock or you were, into like hard rock and metal, or you were into punk and new wave, and there was no mixture of it like there was later on. So it was like you couldn't really enjoy both without people looking at you funny. So it's like once I decided that, all my friends that I was hanging out with at the time were like, "You're into that? We can't be your friend anymore." And so I had to make new friends. And I remember going back to high school that fall, and I had went through back issues of, I was into Cream magazine at the time, and I remember going through back issues and like trying to educate myself about finding different bands. I remember that's how I got the first couple Ramones albums. I got the New York Dolls, the Stooges, the Buzzcocks, the Damned, all that kind of stuff. But I hadn't heard the Misfits yet. And when I came back to school, there was only a couple other kids. I was in a all boys Catholic high school in Queens, is where I was going to school at the time. And there was only a couple of kids into like punk. And they told me, you got to listen to this radio show from WNYU called Noise the Show. You've probably heard of it. It's pretty legendary. And it was an all hardcore and punk show. And it was run by this DJ named Tim Summer, who later became friends with. I'm still friends with him, and it was like nothing else I had ever heard. It was like he would come on, and for half an hour, Tim Summer would scream at the audience and just play track after track of this, like the most energetic, violent sounding, cool music I'd ever heard. And of course, he was playing the Misfits, a couple of times, and I remember hearing him thinking, "Wow, this is great." He had the Misfits on. I believe it was like in October of '81, and I remember listening to that and thinking, "Wow, this is really cool." My friend Paul, who's now deceased, who I was in my first hardcore band with at the time, he told me, "Oh, do you want to get some records?" Because I was like, "Yeah," I was like, "I do." And I still remember this. I wrote down to mention this. I said, "Here's some money, go into the city and get me something." Cool. And he came back and he got me the Night of Living Dead single. And I remember taking it home and putting it on and just sitting there like, holy, this is like my new favorite band. I was like so excited. And I just, I think like maybe the next week or two, I went to the city myself. I was still pretty young. I was like 16. So I had my parents probably drove me in. But there was a record store downtown. I'm sure it does not exist anymore, called Bondi's of Park Row. It's kind of a, semi-famous like little store down in downtown, far downtown. It's on Park Row. And they had a huge wall of singles you could go, and they were all like $3, $2 or $3. And I remember walking into Bondi's and seeing 3 Hits from Hell and Halloween and
there it is. And there it is, baby.
I bought all 3 of them that day. Again,
for how much? How much?
$2 or $3 each. And took them home and just was like, I played the heck out of them. And I was instantly smitten, because I was also, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, I was a horror kid. I grew up, even before I got into music, my main thing was like horror movies, horror comics, stuff like that. And so they, I liked a lot of other bands too, but they clicked with me on a level right away of like, oh, he's singing about all the horror movies, 50s horror movies that I, was obsessed with growing up. So it was like the punk music that I was listening to, plus, the, Famous Monsters and Creepy Magazine feeling and lyrics and, the whole feel of it. So I just fell in love with it.
Let me interject. Let me interject real quick, because I was trying to figure out the perfect time to ask you. I guess you kind of actually already answered what I'm going to ask, but I'll formally ask it. In your mind today, and in your mind then, as a young man, what I mean. No, I guess you actually already answered it. You said it was the punk rock music with, all the horror stuff that you liked. Could
something else too?
Yeah,
I'd also grown up. My parents were into music, and we played music a lot growing up. They even, they took me to see Kiss and Queen and stuff like that.
Right.
They liked some of the music that I listened to, but they played a lot of stuff. They got me into things. My dad was really into doo-wop and 50s rock and roll. So I had already heard all that kind of stuff that I would pretty much analyze as was the building blocks of Glenn Danzig's sort of vocal style and songwriting style. So for me, it also clicked on that level of, oh, this sounds a lot like the 50s rock, rock and doo-wop and early 60s girl groupie type stuff that my dad listened to. And so I also, that was an element that most of the other punk bands I liked didn't really have, that clicked for me too. I think it was all a nice synthesis. Right.
It all just sort of blended and clicked together. And so so then you mentioned, well, I guess we should go to this real quick. Let's go to we have a slideshow, everybody. Hold on. Let's open up the slideshow. Greg has provided us with some flyers. So here's a flyer for Noise the Show. And yes, it was run by this guy, Tim Sommer, who's in this very documentary. They Came from Lodi. One of my most favorite interviews, one of the best interviews I ever conducted was with Tim Sommer, who, he started off as a DJ. Later, he was in a bunch of bands. He also became an A&R guy, and was the A&R guy for Hootie and the Blowfish. That whole, I don't know if he produced it too, but he he was definitely the A&R person at the time for, I think it was Atlantic Records. So he went on to do a whole bunch of stuff. He was a VJ for MTV, I think, and VH1. And
he's also a journalist. I used to read his stuff in Trouser Press magazine and the Village Voice.
Spin.
Yeah. He I got into a lot of music just from reading his reviews.
His acumen for writing. He is one of the best like music writers out there, and I thoroughly enjoy watching him write, read about the stuff that he writes about. I love when he talks about the Beatles. I love when he talks about the Beach Boys even more because he's unabashed. He is a unabashed Mike Love lover, which is so funny. Because we know what a sycophant Mike Love is, but still, it's just so great. I love how, because Tim like actually like hung out with Mike Love, I guess, and like just like, you know, was treated really nicely by Mike Love and just sort of like overlooks like whatever, all that nonsense. But I just find that hilarious. I find that endearing about Tim, actually, for whatever reason. And this guy he's just so sharp. He's so well read. And so it's, you know, it's kind of amazing when you think about it. Here's this guy, he's in college. He's tapped into cutting edge underground music and broadcasting it out into the 5 boroughs, into Greg's house. He's in Queens, and Greg is getting exposed to like this stuff. All these kids are getting exposed to this stuff through Noise the Show. Another listener of Noise the Show was Steve Zing, who was just doing the thing with Devilman. And what's funny is that in that recording, that first recording that you uploaded, is you call in, and so does Steve. And it was funny. I was like waiting to hear Steve's voice, and I was like convinced it was going to be like, "Hi, hi." I don't know why, but it sounded it really sounded just like Steve. It didn't sound like not like maybe like a young Steve, but for some reason I just like as soon as you wrote like a young Steve Zing. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a young Steve Zing.
Oh, young.
Talks like Mickey Mouse or something. Yeah, but I mean, I just this part of the story, or this part of the, like, I don't know if not the culture, the history, whatever. It is history. Sure. I just find it fascinating. And so Noise the Show was this thing. And you know, it's funny actually. I called up Tim not too long ago and sort of tried to pitch him sort of doing maybe a video version of Noise the Show on YouTube. And it never, I don't know. I still gotta redouble my efforts on that. But he did initially show some interest. So who knows, maybe Noise the Show could come back in the future. It really should come back. I think it would be very interesting in its own sort of, in a different kind of way. Where you can literally broadcast like a radio station, like the way we're doing right now, directly from YouTube. So who knows? But okay, so you get exposed like that. When do you buy some singles? Right. When do you join the Fiend Club? I
would guess it's probably like when did Walk Among Us come out? June?
June of '82, maybe.
Yeah. That's when I joined, because when I literally the day it came out, or you know, that week I ran into the city to buy a copy and, you know, played it all week nonstop. And when you opened the record, it had a Fiend Club insert in it, and you know, I thought, oh wow, this sounds great and it's free. So I immediately sent off, and I was kind of like shocked even then, like at how much stuff they sent me. As you can see over here, I mean, they would send really cool packaging. Like it wasn't just like a plain old manila envelope or things. They would send boxes. Sorry. And you know,
is it okay if I show your address is on here? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's an old address. And
okay, sorry, didn't realize. Yeah, okay, sorry.
I've posted those everywhere. It's fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and you could see like here, Glenn himself drew like little, you know, bones around, you know, the dress. And I just, you know, I, as a kid, you're 17 years old and you get this, you're like, wow, you know, one of my musical heroes, it's like took the time to draw bones on the envelope that they send you. And they were, you know, I bought a couple of t-shirts. I think one of these packages was what they sent Evilive, the 7-inch in. Sometimes they would just send stickers. I had a whole, you know, little collection of Fiend Club memorabilia, and there's one of the shirts I got that I had my little cousin put on one day.
Look,
And
there's the cramps.
yep.
Cramps in the corner.
That's my old bedroom.
Wow. And this was your first punk band right here?
Yep. That was The Oppressed, not
The Oppressed.
not the UK Oppressed, which we didn't at that pre-internet time. We didn't realize there was already like a oi band in England who had put out a couple of records by that name, so we didn't know. So when we did a reunion show, we were The Oppressed NYC.
Do you think is Brain Eaters off of Walk Among Us, is that Glenn sort of, I mean, I know you're not like an authority or that you don't know. I'm just rhetorically asking here. Is that Glenn trying to do like a nod to the oi music?
I've always thought that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And then here is Greg, is Dead Kennedys.
Yeah, you could see my Night of the Living Dead single in the background.
That Night of the Living Dead single, man.
Don't ask me why there's a sculpture on my head. I don't know. Thought I was being surrealistic or something.
Or you're a party animal, man. You're just a party animal. Let's. I'm not going to go above those photos. Let's keep talking for a minute. So you're sending away. Okay. So again, I know I always talk about this on the show, but this is just like this is like primo territory, people, for this thing that we talk about week after week. This is a pre-internet time. Well, let's ask this gentleman who was a youngster at this pre-internet time. What was it like to try and get information about underground bands in a pre-internet age?
It was a lot more difficult. You had to do a lot more work. You had to buy now it's like you just go on the internet and people, you could just hear the music instantly. Then you would subscribe to a lot of music magazines. You'd go to record stores and you pick up music magazines and you would read about them. And if something sounded, if they compared it to bands that you already liked, you like, oh, let me check that out. And then maybe you would buy it without ever hearing it. Or you would ask the clerk at the record store to play it for you. That was another way you find a lot of records. Or you'd walk in the record store and they'd just be playing stuff. And you'd be like, oh, what's that? And then they would talk to you about it. Obviously the radio, you'd had to really go to if you dig up these college stations that maybe were not the best reception, but you would listen to them late at night. You put your ear up to the radio because they might play something you'd never heard that was awesome, and then you might not never hear it again. So I would also keep a little notebook next to my bed, and when I'd hear something cool and the DJ would say I'd write it down, and then I'd go look for it. And sometimes it would take a year or two to find the record too, because mail order was different too. Now you can just go on Discogs and you want something, you just buy it. Back then you'd have to maybe order catalogs from music companies, and then you could order it, but maybe they'd be out of stock. Or you'd go into a record store in the city and say, "Can you get this?" And they'd be like, "Well, come back in a few weeks," and maybe you'd get it, maybe you wouldn't. It was much more hit or miss. And things were precious. Everything was precious.
Yeah.
If you found something cool, wow, that was a precious bit of information you then shared with all your friends, and you made them mixtapes with these things.
Currency. It was currency.
Absolutely.
Social
knowledge was currency. Yeah.
Knowledge was social currency. That is so fascinating. And it still is today. But the difference is we have instant gratification. We live in an age where I can press a single button on my cell phone and instantaneously my cell phone will listen to a song that I don't know what it is and then pull it up and go, this song is by yada, yada, yada. Oh, would you like to open it up onto Spotify, which has every single song known to man, add it to your playlist. We live in an age of instant gratification. And it really does. And, I hear from guys that were around, back then. And, even so I'm like a weird situation where I grew up kind of analog and then watched the rise of the internet. Literally, if you think about it, I was born in 85. We were using computers in school, but the internet really didn't take any sort of shape. At least I know you were very early on the internet, but I'm talking about for young kids. We didn't have the information that the internet offered until a little bit later. And then right around the turn of the millennium is when things really exploded for young people, I think. And then obviously that's also when Napster comes into play and stuff, yada, yada, yada. Tell me about what it's like so right now you're in the process of digitizing this vast tape archive. It sounds like, how many tapes do you have?
Let's see. Well, I have them in these like cases that look like this, and so each one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10. So I probably have about a couple hundred tapes.
So Greg is in the process of digitizing hundreds of tapes, and he's found some treasures. I mean, a great example, and this is a miracle of so many things. So like, let's like break down how cool this is. You have this thing called YouTube where everything is sort of like, I mean, essentially immortalized. Like, not obviously nothing's truly immortalized forever, but like in the sense that once it's up on YouTube, you know, generally it's pretty safe if it doesn't get flagged, especially if it's some demo by some obscure band that doesn't have a what's it called, Greg? What's the name of the account where they ID tag things? You know what I'm talking about. There's like CD Baby is one. There's a bunch of them. They're you know what I'm talking about, where you can upload your music. It puts it out on all the music services for you.
Oh yeah, it's CD Baby.
No, it's not just CD Baby. There's another one I'm thinking of. Whatever. In any case,
what the heck is that?
You know what I'm talking about.
I have my band's stuff is through. I just can't think of the name offhand.
It's off. If someone knows, please write it in the comments. But my point is that generally, like, I'm seeing Greg post a lot of these demos of just absolute obscure stuff. I've like never heard of any of this stuff. I'm like, holy crap! Like this ocean of music. No one's ever gonna flag that down. If anything, anybody who might be connected to that stuff might be like, yes, my tape is on YouTube. This is so awesome. It's preserved here. Maybe even Greg got a message.
I've gotten a few of those. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. So there you go. And so we live in this like weird time where like you have this archive with vast like treasures that maybe you might have known, but it's not like you have a Rolodex in the front of your mind. It's like out of sight, out of mind. And you're like, oh yeah, here I forgot I have this tape. Let me digitize it and upload it to the internet. And just like that, in 2021, we have the longest, as far as I'm concerned. And again, I am not a definitive expert. I wasn't even around back then. So how could I really truly know? But the longest Misfits interview with the whole band, not the longest Danzig interview, because that would be the Pusshead tape, but the longest Misfits interview at 37 minutes. Holy crap. With a ton of information, like weird little snippets. I'm trying to remember. I should have written a bunch of stuff down, but there's a lot of.
And you know what, Jeff? That may actually have even been longer, because I think it was already going when I started taping it.
Wow.
I don't know how long it was. I think it was something where I was home and one of my friends maybe called me and said, hey, check out, the Misfits are on WFMU. And I ran over to my tape deck, threw a tape in and pressed record. And the interview was already going. So It may have even been originally longer than that.
Well, in any case, it's the longest recorded thing that we have of the Misfits. I think the longest before that was like maybe 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, 10, 11, 12 minutes, something like that. And it's just kind of mind boggling. And it really does. It reinforces the idea that, we really don't know what's out there. You have to think about all the stuff. And that's just for somebody like the Misfits. Imagine the Beatles, who literally had almost a decade of their life, and really 2 decades, if you want to include post-Beatle years. You have these guys, the 2 decades of their lives, at least if you're stopping at 1980 when John Lennon's murdered, who had every fraction of every second documented. They're discovering stuff all the time. The vast ocean of stuff. So this tape comes out of nowhere. It's really truly spectacular. What made you decide why record this stuff?
Just because at the time, because I just wanted to listen to it, because I wanted to preserve it. I mean, I've always kind of been like someone who likes taking photos. Even as a kid, I saved all my stubs for movies or concerts.
I did that too.
Things. So I always liked scrapbooking with photos and stuff, and that was just natural. So when it came to when I got into music, it was just sort of a natural thing. Like, I can tape stuff off the radio if they're doing like a live show or an interview. And then when I started going to shows, back then they didn't they didn't really check you over too well. So I would always bring my little Walkman in with me. And that's how a lot of these shows on my YouTube channel got taped, is I would just bring this little Walkman in, turn it on when I'm watching the show. Just so and at the time there was no like thought of, I mean, maybe I would trade them with some other people for things, but for the most part it was for my own, just so that I could listen to it back. Maybe the band played a song differently live, or maybe they played something unreleased, and it was just for my own interest. But then obviously years later, once I got on the internet and realized, oh, people are sharing things, then I was like, I got to start digitizing this stuff. And I had started this project back in like 2001 is when I first started digitizing a lot of these things.
Wow.
And then I just sort of put it aside. I did it for a couple of years. I got probably maybe a tenth of the way through my collection. And then I just put it aside for a long time. And I just sort of, because at that point, beyond sharing it like on file sharing, what else was I going to do with it? It never connected with me until a couple of months ago. Oh, maybe I could share it on YouTube, even though it's not a video. Because I also did, in 1986, I ended up buying one of those old clunky original camcorders. And for a while, I was taking it to shows and videotaping shows. So there's like some of the earlier stuff on my channel from the beginning is like shows I taped in 86 to 80
meters, Chop.
Like also like early White Zombie, things like Big Black, a whole bunch of different bands. Suicide, I got a really good Suicide show at CBGB. So those things I put up years ago. But I never thought, I could make like videos with just these audio tapes I have, like interviews I've done or live things. And about a month or two ago, it just occurred to me, wait, why don't I try that? Maybe it'll come out. Maybe somebody would actually like listening to it. And I just started doing them. And I bought one of these little USB Walkman things that hook into your laptop so that I can easily digitize the tapes. And I just started and I started rolling with it. And the Misfits thing was one of the first ones I did. And the response was so incredible that I just thought, I'm going to just keep doing this.
Keep doing it, man. You're doing a real service, man. I really believe you're enriching the stuff that is on YouTube. And yes, there is like it's almost like archival in and of itself to do this stuff onto YouTube. There's so many shows. It's just such a vast ocean of content on YouTube, and YouTube has just become so big. It went from just being a novelty. I remember reading an article. Do you remember reading like 2004 when they're like, there's a new service where you can watch old clips of the Beatles and yada, yada, yada. Like, see things that you never saw before. And it was like, it's like this open source thing. And then all of a sudden, like over the years, it's almost 20 years old now. And it's almost become this institution in and of itself. It's as big as Google. It's bought by Google. It's, people earn their livelihoods on this platform. You can literally do your own radio and TV broadcast studio, which is what we're doing right now. I mean, it's incredible. And so I really do. I have such respect for the work that you are doing. And I really do. I just want to say thank you from me. I know I can speak for more than myself. Everybody who listened to the show where we did a commentary on your stuff, and in general, thank you for keeping that stuff up. And you know what? There are a lot of people that are going to discover music they never would have had they not found it on your YouTube channel. So that's another way to think about it. But let's remove the YouTube element. Let's remove the technology, and let's go back to the 80s. Let's talk about the tape culture. Let's talk about how did tapes, like, we talked about how information was a social commodity. Now tell me about the tape part of it and the tape trading and, maybe getting like a 10th generation tape and like the hiss is real crazy. I don't know. Just tell me all about that stuff.
I think it was just sort of exciting because you'd get a chance to maybe hear something you'd never heard, or a band that maybe never came to your town and you wanted to really desperately hear what they sounded like live. You could get to hear that through trading. I traded with people from, in Europe, from across the United States, especially if it was bands that did a lot of non-album material. Like I used to collect a lot of Cramps tapes, for example, because they did so many songs live that never were on any of their albums. So it was fun to like, you know, trade for one of their tapes because I never knew what songs I was going to get. It might be something I'd never heard before. And, you know, different demos. People, you know, were really into hearing demos. Now it's like, okay, later on they became ubiquitous as, you know, B-sides on CD singles or, you know, expanded editions or something. But back in the 80s, if you wanted to hear demos, you had to find someone who had it on tape. They were not something that was just readily available. So, you know, if you were really into certain bands and really into music, you know, it was like that was your way to find out more, you know, to add to like what was there. There wasn't like this huge glut of material that you could just access. If you really loved a band and they only had a few records out, what were you going to do? So you'd trade for tapes or you'd try to get demos.
You mentioned, so the thing about demos, so this is what I noticed that there's a lot of demos on your channel. Additionally, do you think that it also has to do with the fact, well, I guess this is an extension of taping live songs in that you're hearing potentially a rough sketch of what eventually will be a different song on the album?
I think that's part of it. I think also part of it is the difference in the machinery of putting out records, the business behind it. Now it's like, okay, so you want to, you know, if I record something with my current band, we just put it out on New Year's Day. We just said, well, let's put it out New Year's Day. Bam, it's out because digital is instant. All you have to do, as long as you have the artwork ready and it's mixed or whatever, it just goes out instantly. Back in the 80s, I think one of the reasons I have collected so many demos and posted them is because a lot of times bands that you like that you would go see would never get to put out a record because putting out a record was difficult. They had to get enough money to go into the studio, to get it mixed, to get it mastered, to actually pay for the vinyl to come out. Because then at that point there was only vinyl. So a lot of the local New York bands that I was either friends with or would go see a lot never actually put out any vinyl at all. Or maybe they put out 1 7-inch or something, but they would have all these other songs that they played live and you'd want to hear them. So demos were important because it added to your collection of the songs. Wow.
That's illuminating to me. I never thought about it like that. We have a question comment from that we're going to tackle. And then I want to ask you a follow-up question that's related to what we were just talking about. So my friend Oni64, one of our regular listeners, he asked, does Greg like some of the late 80s earache stuff from the UK, like Napalm Death, Godflesh, Bolt Thrower?
Yes. In fact, I saw Godflesh in 1990 in New York City, and they were amazing. I did an interview with them for the magazine I was working for at the time, and I don't know if that tape exists, but the article does, and I do have that posted somewhere on my Facebook. So yeah, I really liked Godflesh. I also liked Napalm Death. I saw them as well. I remember the singer at the time. We used to, at that point, hadn't heard much like them, and I remember me and my friends would call them the Cookie Monster Band because that was the first band I think we ever heard where the singer was like, and it was really, they were really fun. But I remember buying that 1 7-inch, I think it was called Mentally Murdered, and just putting that on and just being like, this is insane. It's so much fun. So yeah.
And it's the Marty. I just want to read his comment because it's a nice comment. Thanks for everything you've been sharing, Greg. As a longtime Misfits, Samhain and Danzig fan, your uploads really bring me back to a great time in my life. So that's from It's the Marty. Okay, so now going back to the demo thing and going back to now, tell me why you just broke this thing down very perfectly about the demo stuff. Does that sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Does that change? Does that influence? Not influence is not the right word I'm trying to think of. Does that something within? Does that inform? That's the word I'm thinking of. How does that inform a band like the Misfits back then, as well retrospectively now? Everything you just said about demos and how hard it is to put out a record and yada yada yada.
Well, I mean, I obviously don't know the inner workings of their, Plan 9 and everything, but I would definitely think that has something to do with why they didn't put out as many records as they could have. I mean, why didn't Static Age come out in 79 and blow everyone's mind? And I mean, you saw the questions that I asked Glenn on the radio show, and
right.
a couple years later, the first time I interviewed him when the tape didn't come out, which we could talk about later.
We're gonna talk about that.
You have to remember something too. In the early 80s, nobody knew about, I mean, unless you were in the Misfits inner circle,
right?
Nobody knew about those recordings, about Static,
right.
The songs that are on Static Age that are not on Bullet. They were legendary. You'd hear this mysterious thing about this song. And be like, that's why I asked him, what's on Beware, because Beware was the most rarest record at that time, and I didn't even know what was on it because there was no way to look it up, and nobody I knew had it. It was so rare that none of my friends even owned it. So that's why when I asked him on the FMU show, that was like one of my top questions, because I was like, Beware. I heard it listed that they have this record, but what's on it?
Wow.
I didn't know anything about those songs that later turned up on Static Age and Legacy and stuff like that, because they just kept those in the vault. Why? I'm sure there are reasons, but I think in a different era when it's easier to put out music, maybe those things would have just come out as they were recorded instead of just sitting in a vault.
Wow, never thought about it. You just blew my mind. That's a prism that I've never stared through before. The idea that that's something we've never discussed. If they had the means, if they had today's technology, Static Age would have absolutely come out in 78 when they recorded. Like that's really. I mean, it would have gotten dumped on Spotify. Like if you think about it, really, truly. What's also interesting, that's something I always try to wrap my mind around, the idea of like the chronology of how you guys like got to hear that stuff. Like their first album to you is Walk Among Us. That's the first time they put out an album. Mm-hmm. They had a couple singles. They put out Walk Among Us. Then they put out Earth AD. They had already broken up when Earth AD came out. And then all of a sudden, whoa, 3 more songs? Die Die My Darling, We Bite, and Mommy, Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight? The studio version?
I think I'm remembering it right. It felt like that was still in a fairly, one after another continuum, like Evilive to Earth AD to Die Die, all kind of, went in a fairly reasonable time sequence.
Right.
I think that the really crazy thing I remember was when Legacy came out, because that was like, holy, whatever. There's all these early songs that we didn't know existed. That was a mind blower.
Wow. And it's so interesting, it's so interesting because, today, Legacy is not well regarded. It has a special place in my heart for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of people that don't really care too much for Legacy because Glenn, recorded over a bunch of stuff and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, it is kind of crazy to think that like, that's how people heard the other half of Static Age. They didn't get a chance whatever wasn't on a single. And then what else is kind of interesting is that people don't, when you think about it, Beware is technically the first compilation because it combines Bullet and Horror Business, but it also has an extra song. So let me ask you this. You had heard of Beware. You're trying to find out more information. What is the song Last Caress like this unicorn that people, or was that pretty?
I think, we'd heard at some point we heard about it, but I'm pretty sure that I never heard it until long later. I mean, it's on Legacy, right? Or not?
It's not on Legacy. It's on Collection 2. It's on Static Age, obviously. And it's on the box set. But it's like so hold on. The other thing too is then Metallica covers Last Caress in the 80s for whatever that EP, that covers EP, and that must have been 86. So
87.
Oh, sorry, 80s. Thank you. I'm not brushed up. I don't know too much about Metallica actually. So apart from their connection really with the Misfits, or the the influence in the Samhain and yada yada yada. But what's interesting, Greg? I never really thought about this either. Glenn must have given them a tape of Last Caress, And because how exposed was anybody to Last Caress in 1987?
Not very.
Wow.
I think it was like extreme. I think I had already heard the song. Like I'd probably traded for a tape of it, but I mean, I still, even with my collection when it was at its greatest extent, I never owned Beware. Beware was like the hardest to find record. Right. It was impossible. So I never actually had a physical copy of it, but somehow I had heard it before Metallica's version. I think I'd probably traded, or a friend taped it for me, something like that.
Gotcha.
But I was a hardcore fan. I think your average fan may never have heard it until then.
That is really insane. So there's a lot of people that might have heard the Metallica's version of Last Caress before the Misfits version of Last Caress, if you were coming up. And then it just kind of blows my mind, because people all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I love that Metallica is covering this band, the Misfits. I need to know more about the Misfits, yada, yada, yada. But they can't even get that song until, when did Collection 2 come out? It must have come out in the early 90s. Does anybody know when Collection 2 came out? I'm kind of curious to know. Oni says Legacy has that reverb sound that you can't get on Static Age. Maybe, I don't know. Are you thinking about Glenn plays guitar he plays guitar and bass over. He keeps the drum tracks. Or maybe you're thinking of the twang that's, or that reverb thing that's kind of going on American Nightmare, which is probably the single most obscure track besides Spook City USA until, back then, really hard to come by. Oh, so check this out, Greg. This is mind-boggling. 1995 was the first time that you could get Last Caress not on a bootleg, technically. If you didn't have a copy of Beware, which means, so here's the thing. There are some people that definitely had a copy of Beware. There's some people that had the Static Age material on tape, as you said, the Inner Circle. So Last Caress definitely was circulating, and Metallica definitely got a hold of it. But if you were a casual Misfits fan who was not trading tapes, who had only heard the Metallica version, you didn't get a chance to hear the Last Caress version until 1995, unless you could find some bootleg that might have had the Beware version. So again, if anybody wants to prove me wrong, or I might be wrong about that, but from what we're trying to figure out here right now, it sounds like it's 1995. That's kind of mind-boggling right there. Oni says Cliff. Okay, so here we go. Cliff made Misfits mixtapes for the band to hear. He might have had Beware and recorded it on a tape. So there you go. That's probably the exposure.
He was a diehard fan, like a real.
Right. He was the guy who brought the band to the Metallica, and he had a Crimson Ghost, and he was in the Fiend Club, and I don't think those guys saw the Misfits live. I know that they saw Samhain live, but I don't know if they ever went and actually saw.
They might have. I mean, I think the Misfits played San Francisco. That's where they were big, so it's possible. It's
possible. It's definitely, at least Cliff might have. Yeah. Cliff most certainly might have. But what's interesting, it's just interesting how this stuff sort of, seeded itself out in such an organic way. And, and then the other thing too is, you're saying you were kind of taking it. I asked you a question and I was kind of expecting the opposite of the answer you gave. You said more of oh, could you imagine if this had come out? And I was thinking in my head, Jesus, what a fossil record that they left at a time when it was impossible to record albums. They left a big body of work behind. They did 54 studio songs, and that's not including all the different versions of songs for a tiny independent horror punk band. It's pretty nutso. Here's a question for you, Greg.
Sure.
And I don't know if you would necessarily know the answer, but I'm sure you're much more well-versed in this than I would be. So Glenn starts Plan 9 in 1978, right? And before that, he kind of had that little label, Cough Cool. He put on
Blank, right?
Blank Records. Were there any other bands that had formed, any other punk bands at that time? I guess SST kind of counts, right? Were there any other punk bands really, or at least on the East Coast, that were sort of making their own label to put out their own music that early as Glenn was?
There were other bands in the scene at the time. There was a band called The Mad who were really awesome.
Oh, yeah, Screaming Mad George. Yeah,
the Screaming Mad George. Yeah, the horror effects artist. And I have their 2 7-inches, and they were great.
Phenomenal.
And they're, I think, roughly around the same period, maybe a little later, like 79, 70, 78, 79.
79 to 81?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
I don't know.
I know they were doing stuff in 79. I think the singles that I have are from that era.
You got the eyeball? You got the eyeball? And
yes, I have eyeball.
Friday.
It's a great single, yeah.
You know who showed me The Mad for the first time? I had never listened to them. Joe Truck.
He probably saw. I think he actually saw them live. I was too young to see them live. He did.
Speaking of which, we're talking about this guy Joe Truck. Let's go to our picture of Joe here. I've actually seen this picture before. Joe, one of Joe's first. I believe this was Joe's first tattoo. Joe is covered in tattoos now, but I believe he told me his first tattoo was the Crimson Ghost. This is Joe in his Samhain shirt. He was in a band with Damien. Right after Damien left Pete Marshall, right after he left Samhain, years before he would play with Iggy Pop, he played with Joe in a band called the Brain Eaters. Phenomenal band. Night Must Fall. Just really, really great. Oh, I have a question. This is kind of jumping around. Am I right about this? When you were talking about where do you go? There he is. When you were talking about in your article that you wrote, the Danzig article, you used the word unman, which is from Swamp Thing comic books, because Dr. Arcane had this like race of unmen.
You were right.
Yes, right, right. But Joe also wrote a song called The Unman.
Yeah, and you were right. That's where I thought to use that from Joe's song. You were right.
Wow, that's spectacular. That I was able to, come on, are you not impressed?
I was watching your show and I was like, he nailed it. He got it.
Dude, I was dying to know. He's going The Unman, because I listened, man. Even before I met Joe, I loved those 2 records, man. I love that song Torture Garden. I think is their best song. Love Torture Garden.
They were great live too. I got to see them a bunch of times, and I remember how exciting it was for Joe too when Pete joined the band, because he just brought kind of this instant lead guitar star power to it. I'll add, not to plug my channel, but I have
please plug. What are you talking about? Not to plug. What are you talking about? Plug away.
I have 3 or 4 Brain Eaters live shows that I videotaped up on my channel if you want to see what they were like live.
So we're going to put the link right now. Keep talking. I'm getting the links right now.
Yeah, they were really good. And I believe that they had a second EP that, here's another example of demo type thing. Their first EP was 3 songs and it actually came out on vinyl, but then they recorded a second record called No Room in Hell, which was actually with Pete on guitar.
And that's Torture Garden.
Right. But that didn't come out at the time. It was only
It's never come out. It's never come
out. But Joe is putting it out, and I'm pretty excited about that because it's a great EP.
Can't wait. I'm going to buy myself a copy for sure. Especially because I feel morally obligated to, since I've had this music for a very long time. So there's a bunch of shows. I just put Greg's channel in the comments. I mean, I've had Greg's channel in the descriptions before. Please subscribe to Greg's channel. If you like all the stuff that we're talking about, hold on, I'm gonna pull up the Brain Eaters. As a matter of fact, why not here as we're talking about stuff? I'm just gonna sort of plop that in. So let me ask you this. So let's segue now into, since we're going there. We'll have Joe playing in August of '87 while we no. Stop it right now. Hold on. Here's Joe. This is Joe in Brain Eaters while we're talking. Okay.
I think that might be a later version of the band. Yeah, I would go with one of the '86 ones, late '86 shows. I'm putting only because I don't think Pete's on this particular.
Yeah, show. Let's get him with Pete. Let's get one with Pete. What about September 1st, '86?
That's their first show, and that was before he joined. Try the November one. There's like a November
27th.
Yeah, that's a good one.
This is 2 days after my first birthday. Isn't that trippy? Look at that. I was born November 25th, 1985. And a year later, you guys were was this at CBGB's, of course?
Yep.
World famous. Hold on. So there's the show. Okay. So now let me ask you this question. All right. So first of all, so tell me about how let's see, where is Pete's not there?
Pete's all the way on the
he is.
Stage right, so the left of the screen.
There he is.
There he is.
Wow, look at him. And he's still playing that Iceman that he was playing fresh out of Samhain.
See what I mean? This is like they were awesome live.
Man, I'm so glad that these live shows exist. I didn't check. I should really check. Are there any songs that they played live that were not recorded?
I think maybe just a cover or two, but I don't know offhand if I think all of their material ended up on No Room in Hell, the second EP.
Okay.
I don't think any of the stuff they did with Pete was totally unrecorded, as far as I know. Gotcha. Joe would know better, but I'm pretty sure of that.
Gotcha. So let's first talk about Samhain and this. So first of all, okay, no. First of all, you never actually saw the Misfits live, right?
Well, that I was going to mention that. I wanted to, but remember I was 16 and I had grown up in a sort of, a little bit of a sheltered environment. My parents were a little overprotective and I didn't have a lot of friends who were into this. So, when I was in high school, it was really hard for me to convince my parents to let me go to shows in the city. Right. I remember distinctly, hearing about the Misfits playing. I think it was the show in late 81, the Halloween show, and I wanted to go, couldn't go. I remember getting a flyer for the Gildersleeve show. I think that was it was either 82 or 83, and I really wanted to go. I remember saying to my friend, oh, maybe we can convince our moms, to let us go to the show. And he was like, nah, whatever, we're going to skip it. And I was like, no. So I wanted to go, but I was a little too young. I think the first time my parents let us go to one was we went to see the Dead Kennedys at the end of high school, like in June of 83, like right around the time I graduated.
Wow.
So it wasn't until 84 that I really started to go into the city every couple weeks and see shows like constantly. So I didn't get to see the Misfits, but I did see Samhain 3 times.
Yeah.
And I almost saw them a 4th time. And I was going to mention this when we were talking before about the videotape when I got that camcorder.
Yeah.
Now, this is really sad because I would have loved to be able to post this. Okay, so it was the 3rd time I went to see Samhain.
Yeah.
I ended up not actually seeing the band because it was summer of 86.
Okay.
And at that time I had gotten the camcorder that May and I was starting to take it to shows. And I was friendly with somewhat friendly with the band, having interviewed Glenn once before. And I thought, all right, I think they were playing at the Ritz. And
that's the final show. That's
okay. So show. I'd seen them at the Ritz earlier that year with UK Subs. I guess it was maybe in April or May. And that was a really great show. This was the last one. So this was in the summer and I had the camcorder by then. So I thought, oh, you know what? Let me give it a shot. It would be so awesome to get to videotape this show. And I remember I walked up with the camcorder around my shoulder, because it was these big bulky camcorders. I remember walking up to the front door and the doorman looked at me and he's like, you can't bring that in here. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. It's okay with the band. I kind of lied a little. I was like, it's okay with the band. They know I'm doing it, and I'm friendly with them. And he's like, nope, sorry. You have to go put that back in your car. Now, I had just bought it, and it was like I don't know. At that time, it was really expensive for a kid. I was 18, 19. It was like $1,000 thing. I was like, I can't leave this in my car. We're talking New York City, 1986. Your car was broken into half the time you would leave it on the street. So I went home because I couldn't. There was nowhere to put the camcorder. Now, I didn't lose the ticket because I think I was on the guest list maybe by then. So I was okay. I didn't lose anything, but I didn't get to see the show and I didn't get to videotape it. And I'm bummed about it still all these years later.
Well, it is on tape. So if you ever do want to see the show, but it's not your tape. It's not your tape, Greg. Come on. No, that's that is a bummer, man. That's totally a bummer. And that was the new music seminar, I think.
Yes.
And that's where Rick Rubin was like, I want to sign you guys. And he was like, kind of a jerk to Damien, who would be sacked from the band a few weeks later, as he would tell me. I recently had him on my show, my Pizza Punk show. So we talked about it. Okay. So before we
tell you some more Samhain anecdotes, though.
I do. Okay. But I want to actually just take it back one step back to the Misfits for a second.
Sure.
I want to ask you. So the Misfits break. Two things, since maybe you'll know about this. First, the El Kabong incident.
That's where where Doyle hit the kid with his guitar.
Yes. Now, I know you weren't obviously there. I mean, nobody was there. But the reason why I'm asking you about it is because the way I read about this historical event, it was like this thing pre-internet. It's like this thing's like traveled far and wide, about this story about like the Misfits, getting into it, and Doyle killed a kid, or Doyle cracked him over the head, and he can't like walk anymore. Like, like every variation of telephone that was literally probably told over a telephone about this thing. Did you ever remember hearing, since the Misfits are on your radar, did you ever remember hearing about this event?
I'm not 100% sure. They had a reputation for having a bit of a violent, sometimes live show. I remember in late 81, like when I was first getting into them, hearing about the feud with Bobby Steele, and Tim Summer played the live thing early, but years before Evilive came out, where they were like yelling at Bobby Steele. So I was like, I was aware. I think everybody who was a fan of them was aware that they were kind of like, there was always some they would spur animosity from some people. I don't know how much I heard about that particular incident. I think I vaguely remember hearing it, but I don't remember it being as big a deal as it wasn't like something that we heard about as much as, say, the grave robbing thing. That
was my next thing. Okay, yeah,
that we heard a lot about.
Okay, tell me about. Okay, so that was literally going to be my follow up to that. Interesting. So tell me how that spread, or what you remember, if you can remember. Again, I know we're asking you to go far back.
I just remember people saying like, oh, when they were on their tour down south, they like were in New Orleans, and they dug up a body, and Glenn has the body in his house, and get exaggerated, but yeah, people did talk about that. That was definitely on everyone's radar.
But that's what's interesting, is that like, and this goes back to the thing that we were talking about like the information, this information is a commodity, and like, oh, I heard the latest thing about the Misfits. Here, we're hanging out, listening to records, just chilling on Saturday night, eating pizza. Did you hear this? like that sort of thing. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I just find that stuff fascinating. Okay, so then the next thing would be the breakup. Do you remember anything? Do you remember hearing about them breaking up, or just being like, oh, it's a bummer? Or did your friends talk about it, or anything? Yeah, I mean,
we at the time, I had been, to be honest, I was a little disappointed with Earth AD Wolf's Blood, because it's a great record. I grew to like it a lot, but at the time I felt like, and I think there was some other fans at the time who agreed with me that thought, they're speeding up to try to compete with the newer, faster, younger hardcore bands. And for me, while I think they still did a great job with it, it kind of, for me, was getting away from the core like thing that made them special, which was these really melodic, great songcraft, but set to very like powerful music. So I think at the time, it came out, I was just like, well, this is really good, but like, there's nothing on it that I love as much as like the stuff from Bullet and Horror Business and even Walk Among Us. And so when they broke up, it was I was really disappointed because I'd never gotten to see them particularly. But it was kind of like, well, maybe they were sort of winding down. Like it was not, I don't know, there was a certain sense that maybe it had, run its course a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I can understand that.
I think also there was a thing where I don't know where I acquired it from, but I got a bootleg video at that time, somewhere around that time, of one of their California shows.
Okay.
And
was it an opening for Black Flag?
I really don't remember. I just know that it was like it was in California. It was the tour with Robo.
Okay.
And I remember distinctly watching it. The sound quality wasn't very good. The video quality, but even then I could kind of get a sense from it. And I'm thinking, I was a little bummed because I thought they were sort of sloppy. I want to be like diplomatic here. I'm not like
no, talk free. We all know the truth, man.
I kind of was surprised because I was like, wow, they're you listen to the records and they're incredibly tight and they're like, bam, they're on the money. And live, well, what they're, it kind of, people have said, it's kind of like sounds like a blender, the guitar and bass sound especially was like, yeah. And I just was. I thought, wow, they're one of my favorite bands, and they're like their records are untouchable, but live they have cool energy, and Glenn's great, but the musical ability is not maybe there. So I was a little disappointed to see that, and again, so that sort of added to the sense of, I think this leads into Sammy of me wanting to see Glenn doing something with a band that would put their full effort and really like be a machine behind him and allow not where it wouldn't just sort of be this chaos.
Right. And I when I listen to all those recordings, that's exactly what it is, man. It's chaos, man. It's pure chaos. Let me just go to the comments real quickly. I have some comments. It's the Marty says, I got the Hate Breeder bootleg back in 88, 89. Or whatever, simply for a Misfits version of Last Caress, and just a few months later got a 7-inch bootleg of Beware. So he's talking about, tracking stuff down pre-95 to get Last Caress. Pod's magic, what. Greg is a big Game of Thrones guy, and didn't you correspond? Used to correspond with George R. R. Martin.
He named a character in the books after me.
There you go.
That's something that I always do as a trivia, like at work, at my job, when people when you have like a company team building exercise, they're like, name one thing about you that's like people don't know that's funny, and mine's always is have a character in the Game of Thrones books named after me.
All right, so what's funny? Like again, socially, like in pop culture wise. It's like you own 1,000 Bitcoin before the year 2017. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get that, right? Like,
yes.
like that's hilarious. It's so hilarious. It's like pre-2010. Okay, whatever, Greg. Post 2010, what? Like, that's so freaking cool. Like, But I just thought I would mention that because I just always thought that was cool that you were like that the Game of Thrones thing. It's the Marty says, and he bought 3 Hits from Hell at a record con back then instead of Beware, since I had to have a studio version of Horror Hotel. I mean, man, the effort just to get this stuff. Oni says right off of Samhain, probably referring to Pete coming off of Samhain and into Brain Eaters, and you notice. On stage, he is way less reserved than he is in some of those Samhain gig videos that you see. He seems like he's really thrashing out with the Brain Eaters, which is interesting. It's the Marty says, even back in the 80, 89, even back in 80, 89, Beware was $70 or more, and he got 3 hits for 60-ish. So that these records appreciated so quickly. I think even at the tail end of 83, they were already starting to appreciate, right? Like,
well, in end of 82, when you listen to that WFMU interview, you heard the story on there about how Glenn said, we found a bunch of copies of Bullet, and I brought them down to Blake Bob. So me and my friend, like couple of days later,
you went right down.
We went right in and we bought it. But you know how much we paid for it? I mean, at the time, I thought, wow, this is expensive. I think Bullet was like $10.
It's insane. It's insane because
I thought that was expensive because back then, you know, $2-3 was what a regular single would cost you.
Right.
So,
I mean, and now that same Bullet that had you held on to it, and I know you did hold on to some stuff, and you did pretty well. Yeah, you did hold on to Bullet, but you did pretty well off of the Bullet and some other things. You know, recently, I think it was last year. I'm not sure if it was a Bullet or I know there was a Legacy of Brutality, and then I know there was a Cough Cool, and all of them went for. I think all of them cleared $10,000, and these are just 7 inches. And it seems like the market has really, really inflated because it was never like that for years and years and years. So yeah, but yeah, it's kind of incredible, and it also makes you wonder about additionally, it's such a commodity that it's getting bootlegged. Like Cough Cool is getting bootlegged, like all this stuff is getting bootlegged because
that was the only way I owned Cough Cool. You couldn't get that anywhere. I had a bootleg of it because that was the only way to have it. Right.
I have a Cough Cool bootleg, and I have it signed by Manny Martinez, the original drummer, because I interviewed him and I was like, you know what? Well, I don't know when I'm ever going to see this guy again. And I don't have a real Cough Cool, but why not have Manny autograph the bootleg version? Because why not? Because I can. I'm not really an autograph guy, and I'm not really a collector guy in that kind of way. I collect interviews. I don't collect records the way you do. I mean, look at all the records sitting behind Greg. Just got a vast, it's just an ocean. Oni says he in reference to the bootleg that you bought, Santa Monica Civic Show in '83. So that's really crazy too. So in the early '80s, you're buying bootleg VHS just so you can watch the band, and it's like there's no internet. I know
it was the only way I could see what they were like live.
Yeah, that's great. That is so beyond insane when you think about it. Like it really is when you think about that. And what's interesting too is that, I feel like all those bootleg shows have really just like they're just. It's not that they're not worth anything anymore. I'm sure the original tapes are worth something for collecting reasons, but it's like in the age of YouTube, all that stuff is just super obsolete. It's not the commodity that it once was because you can find any of the rarest shows on YouTube.
I didn't save any of my bootleg video tapes because they're all on YouTube.
That's exactly, right.
Nailed it exactly.
Yeah.
There's no point.
I got to tell you, as a slight offshoot, as a avid DVD, as a physical media aficionado and collector of the genre film variety, I collect lots of genre films, and I had a giant library. And I have to tell you, once streaming services started to really rise in the last decade, I have just lost all need or urge to collect things. It's all available to me. I am super picky. I only go for boutique stuff off of Arrow Video, Scream Factory. I'm very Criterion Collection, of course. I am super Kino. I'm just super.
I'm exactly the same. I have a huge DVD and Blu-ray collection too, but now it's only obscure horror movies that I know I can't just instantly order up on Netflix or Amazon.
Right. Yeah. It's just because now that everything's available, even if it gets taken away at some point, I'll just order that on Amazon if I really want to watch it. It's why rent something for, $4 or $5 with an additional 10, I can own it maybe, depending on the price. But okay, back to our schedule program. So now we're in the age of Samhain. So what is your first introduction to Samhain, and what are your thoughts back then? And again, the average person might not find this interesting. I find this fascinating because we're hearing from your perspective at that time. It's not like the perspective of a fan now after the internet. It's at that time as it's happening, which I find fascinating. So what is going on in your mind, in your head, as being the passionate music lover that you are, following this stuff the way that you do, and also, I if you could somehow weave in, I feel like this is a made-to-order answer I'm asking for. Can you also talk about the rise of post-punk and Batcave and death rock and
it's all intertwined in my history and for that history, so I can and I can tie it all together in a way.
Please go ahead.
So early 1984. Okay, so like 83, the Misfits break up, and at that point, it kind of coincided with me personally. Not that I was bored with it, but like, you know, I felt like the whole hardcore thing had sort of run its course for me. Like I had gotten a little bored with it. I wasn't as fond of like the newer, more like, you know, how do you want to put it? More testosterone filled bands. You know, I preferred the earlier 81, 82 scene a little bit. So by 83, I was kind of a little bored with it, and I, you know, was looking for new sounds. And I started to get more into post-punk stuff. I started listening to like a lot of like Susie and the Banshees and Bauhaus and things like that. The Cure and Killing Joke, you know, all these bands. And at that time, there was no goth scene. There was no like, it wasn't really thought of as anything different. It was just part of the alternative punk scene, but it was called post-punk. And I started to really get heavily into that. And
question. Sorry to interrupt. Mm-hmm. I've always tried to understand why it's called post-punk. If it's not just, is it not just? Oh man, and this also I'm going to throw you an additional curveball as we talk about all this stuff because it's related, even though it takes place a few years slightly earlier. You have the punk rock, the counterculture punk rock branch seems to split. I've talked about this several times. You have the record companies trying to push punk rock as new wave, right? Am I right about that, roughly? Yep. Then you have hardcore. Then you have like Ramones and stuff still just being punk, right? Just like, you know, we're a punk band.
Sure.
Straight up the middle. And then you also have this post-punk. And why is it called post-punk?
That's a really good question. I recommend there's a book called Rip It Up and Start Again by, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the author, Simon something. It's a great journalist, and that's like, to me, the definitive book about post-punk and tells you everything about how the music developed. It actually developed pretty much only a couple of years after punk. Like 78 is when post-punk really starts with Public Image, Wire, Gang of Four, Susie and the Banshees, Gang of Four. Did I say Gang of Four already? Well, you know, the bands that basically were saying we're going to do punk, but we're going to do an artier, more, musically experimental version of it. And that sort of just exploded as in the beginning of the 80s. So it's called post-punk because it came out, immediately after the original punk wave. I mean, I didn't make it up, but I know, people were already by like 82, 83, it was like a common term, because if you wanted to talk about music that wasn't just basic power chord punk rock, that was the best way to describe it and have people understand you.
Gotcha. So it's like, it's really almost like, for lack of a better term, being called post-punk in a weird kind of way.
It's a really umbrella term that doesn't have, it's not particularly homogenous. There's a huge variety of bands.
Well, much like punk, really.
Under that umbrella. There's like different subgenres within it. You have the sort of like angular type of, Gang of Four, Wire type stuff. You have the more stuff that's a little more atmospheric and dreamy, like Echo and the Bunnymen and Joy Division. And then you have like this stuff that's developed into goth, which was the stuff that was a little more morbid and a little more heavy and dark.
Right.
So it kind of had it kind of within post-punk itself, it branched off. How it ties into this story is because I think probably at the same time that I was exploring this stuff, Glenn was exploring it, from what I understand, what I heard from him as well. He started listening to those bands that I was listening to, and also he got into the new Batcave type bands like Sex Gang and Alien Sex Fiend, and he was listening to this stuff at the time, 85 or so. So, but anyway, to go back to the story,
right.
By early 84, I was really getting heavily into this stuff. And I went one day record shopping to a store out on Long Island called Zigzag. And I remember this really distinctly. I walked into the store and I was flipping through the records, and I remember seeing an Alien Sex Fiend album. And at the time, I really hadn't heard them. And I was just looking at it because it was really cool. And of course, later I ended up becoming friends with the band, and I wrote their bios for them. But at the time, I didn't know who they were really too much. And a guy who was at the record store came over to me. He was just hanging out there, and he was this like 6'7" dude with a devil lock. And he said to me, "Oh, you like Alien Sex Fiend? I just saw them, whatever." And he started talking to me, and that was my friend Jack Shee, who I later became really good friends with. And the
is he in those photos? He's in the photos.
He's in these photos. He's the guy who did the Samhain interview with me that never came out. And he later worked for Caroline Records, so it's a big circle. But anyway, Jack was the first. Jack was the first person that I'd ever met who was not in the Misfits, who had a devil lock in real life.
Wow. Here, let's pull up a picture of him as we're talking about him, because I think that's only right. We have a picture of.
There's a picture of him at the Samhain Danzig show. It's probably further back. He was in the front row.
Where? Oh, here we go. Here's one.
Yep, that's him in the middle. Actually, and the other person I was just about to mention is on the left there. The girl who was the clerk at the record store, was behind the counter, was a woman named Abby Mahler Pike, Jack's friend, who he introduced me to. Her husband at the time was Al Pike of Reagan Youth.
Right.
And as you know, Al Pike later was in Samhain very briefly and played bass on Archangel.
Right.
So that's how I met Jack and Abby at the same day, the same moment. And I quickly became like really close friends with Jack. He would we were pen pals for a little bit. Then we started meeting up at shows. And I remember him telling me about Samhain. I think he was the first person who told me about it, because he was such a fanatic about Misfits and everything related to it, that he was kind of really clued in because of Abby, because Abby had put out a fanzine. Why can I not remember the name of her fanzine? I'm sorry, Abby.
She's in the book. She's in the book.
Yeah, she had a very influential hardcore punk fanzine and was friends with the Misfits. So she was getting a lot of inside information, and Jack then was getting a lot of inside information. So they told me about Samhain. This would have been early '84, like sometime in the very beginning of '84 when I met them. And I remember thinking, Samhain, wow, that's a weird name, but like they were like, this is really cool. And I think they mentioned, he's incorporating some of these darker sounds, a little bit of this, at the time we didn't really use the word goth yet. So it was like, he's been listening to some of this, Batcave stuff. And so Samhain's going to be a little darker and a little more like that. And I was very intrigued, and I was like, oh, wow, I really want to hear this. I remember they played the Rock Hotel show, was their first show that spring. I'm not sure of the date.
March.
It's probably right around the time that I met Jack and Abby. I didn't go to the show, unfortunately, but I remember reading about it and hearing about it afterwards. I was also a fan at the time of the band The Meatmen. I'm sorry, not The Meatmen. Well, I was a fan of them too, but I was a fan of Minor Threat. I had their singles. So I was really excited that a couple of the guys from, Lyle Preslar was a guitarist I loved, was in Samhain at that time. And I thought, wow, this is awesome, because Minor Threat had broken up too. And I was like pretty excited about it. So I don't know if that answers your question about what I was expecting from Samhain. I was expecting a lot, because I was getting into this darker post-punk stuff, which I heard they were going to tap into. And they had, tapped into this Minor Threat thing. So I was like pretty excited. And when the first album came out, I loved it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. It's different than the Misfits, but just as good in its own way. I'm going to interject here real quick. Sure.
How do you, and this is something I've asked this to Steve, I've asked Pete, both in the band, both the guys who played the music with Glenn, right? Like, I've asked them both this question, and it's just a very interesting question. You, who are so well versed in this stuff, I want to hear what you have to say.
Sure.
How do you categorize a band like Samhain? I have my own idea, but I'm very curious to hear, how do you describe Samhain to someone who is hip to music but has never listened to anything like Samhain? Like, you can use music terms that they would understand, but they've never actually listened to Samhain itself, if that makes any sense.
Oh, so someone who isn't familiar with the Misfits, you mean?
All right. So pretend I have never. I'm familiar with music. Maybe I'm even familiar with the Misfits, but I am not familiar with Samhain. But yet I speak a musical language. So you could say to me, hey, it's like Nick Cave, blah, 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 like, make some sort of funky equation to try. Like, how would you describe Samhain to someone? That's what I'm interested in. I'd love, and that's not a test. I'm just
no, it's hard because they're kind of at an intersection between a lot of different things.
Right.
Obviously, it's still rooted in the punk stuff and the Misfits stuff. It's still Glenn's voice.
Right.
But I think, it obviously takes a totally different tack with sort of the guitar playing. Right. Especially on Unholy Passion is where you hear a lot of the post-punk and death rock type of guitar playing. I think the whole thrust of the band is much less rooted in that sort of 50s rock and doo-wop stuff that the earlier Misfits was. I think it's gone past that. Like if they went into hardcore full-time on Earth AD, in Samhain they went somewhere different completely, and they left that totally behind. Right. Brought a little bit, I mean, not as much as in Danzig the band, but there's a little more metallic influence as well, I think. You can hear that he's also been listening to Black Sabbath and stuff like that. Maybe even Metallica already at that point, though. I don't, again, it's not metal the way even some of the Danzig stuff is, but it's just not pure punk rock anymore. And I think also in terms of the themes, you would say the music reflects the fact that it's not just about monster stuff anymore.
Right.
And, it's about pagan stuff. It's about the occult. It's about, put it this way. If the Misfits is like those 50s movies that I love, The Crawling Eye and all those kind of things, this, Samhain is more like The Wicker Man and The Omen and stuff like that. It's more like 70s. It's like 70s horror. It's occult. It's a different vibe. But cool, but different. Yeah. I don't know if that helps.
No, I think that was cool, man. I mean, there was no wrong answer, really. Yeah. I was just kind of curious to see how you would phrase that together. I've often, I've sat and I revel, and I revel in songs like Macabre, because you have to think they're playing with hardcore guys. That's one area where Glenn Danzig has not left off. He's taken out Samhain, but he hasn't changed. He's not playing the Pyramid Club in New York City, in 1984 with I don't know who would be a contemporary that would play in the Pyramid Club, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Sure. He's traveling the country, with his band, doing hardcore shows, with a bunch of hardcore kids, essentially, and they're playing songs like Macabre. Or The Shift. It's but
here's the thing, Jeff. I think, remember how I told you before, what he was listening to was kind of mirrored to what I was listening to. Yeah. I wasn't just the only one. So was my friend Jack. So was a lot of my other friends. I think there was, basically that entire, at least where I lived, that the whole post-punk goth scene in 85 or so was basically kids who used to be a few years earlier were listening to hardcore but kind of got bored a little with it and maybe didn't want to do the whole once they're I don't want to rag on New York hardcore because I love hardcore and I'm from
so do I.
I'm rooted in that stuff, but I think there was a certain shift where it became more of not a gang, but a uniform thing, like the skinheads and
conformist meat and potatoes.
Exactly. It became more of a jock. Here, this is what we're. It became more of a jock thing. And so for the kids like me and a lot of my friends who were a little bit maybe more interested in, horror movies and, dressing up a little bit, we didn't we kind of got bored with that quick. And so we gravitated towards this other stuff. And I think that kind of mirrored with what Glenn was doing at the same time. So it's I think a lot of his fan base, there was some people who were still just purists, hardcore purists who were still listening to Samhain, but there was a lot of people who were moving on to all these other sounds and kind of just naturally gravitated along with Samhain. So I don't think it was as much of a shock for much of his audience, because they were kind of making that same shift that he was.
Right. I'm just going to put a pin in it for one quick second because I want to do two things. One, I want to look at the comments, and two, we're going to go to our sponsor. Hold on. All right. So real quick, Oni says post-punk had those tribal drum beats and chorus effect guitar sound, and the bass was often given more attention on the mix. So in trying to going back to a conversation about post-punk and how it sort of branched off and was different.
That person is 100% correct.
There you go. There you go. So there you go, Oni. It's the Marty says, got the Ghoul's boot of Cough Cool. That's like the Ghoul's boot is, for those who aren't familiar, it's like, I guess it's like one of the first boots of Cough Cool, where it says the label, the actual label, it says the Ghoul or the Ghouls on it. It doesn't say the Misfits. At the same record con that I got the 3 hits, since in the late 80s, there was no other way to hear Cough Cool. Isn't that crazy to think? That's the only way you're going to hear Cough Cool before 1995 is if you can get a Cough Cool bootleg, or if you can get like some sort of tape or compilation. Like otherwise, you don't get to hear that song. Those songs, I should say. And you know what's interesting, Greg? When you think back to Cough Cool, in a weird kind of way, oh my God, like maybe this is a hot take. Maybe I'm a little crazy. I don't know if you're already thinking what I'm thinking, but is Cough Cool like, it's almost kind of like, it's almost post-punk right then and there. It's almost like it's super weird. I've called it art rock in the past. I've said it's like art rock. It's like, I don't know, it's a bunch of things. But when you think about everything we were just talking about, I feel like the song Cough Cool is steeped in that. You know what I'm saying? Like, or very easily would translate to a post-punk version. How about that?
Sure, I totally agree.
Okay. Moving on. It's
think about it too. A lot of the post-punk bands were listening to stuff like The Doors and the Velvet Underground, and that's what you hear in Cough Cool.
Right, and especially with the electric piano just going ding 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 ding. It just sounds like, I don't know. It works, man. It works. Interesting. Someone posted in the group that you recently joined, Greg. We get a lot of interesting hot takes and just cool, interesting things like minutia. And someone said that or brought in an interpretation of Cough Cool actually being about a vampire, which I had never considered. And it's somewhere in there, if you search in the post, it's like this whole breakdown of lyrically why it has to, why it's about a vampire. So
I think I read that on the page, and I thought,
you did, yeah,
that was intriguing. I had never thought of that either.
Very intriguing. Additionally, Oni said, oh no, sorry, it's the Marty says, I'd also like to bring up that some of these record con guys are not like the fans I've traded with, but back then I didn't know any better. Okay. And Oni says, Theme for a Jackal also had a post-punk sound. I could dig that. I could dig that. Also, as I've said many times on the show, London Dungeon, man, is like oh my God. Could you, like, I'm kind of surprised that London Dungeon is not like an anthem, you know, for like goth and post-punk bands to cover. If you really think about it,
I've seen a post-punk band cover it.
And how did they do? Did they sort of nail it? Did they nail the landing?
They did a pretty straight version of it.
Interesting.
And it was good, and it fit.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to do real quick, guys, I am going to take a moment, if you'll indulge me. I have been talking about this for some time, and I finally got it up on the website. If I could find it, I just had it and I lost it. Where I'm just going to stall as I get it again, because it's right here and we're talking about. So guys, I have a new T-shirt design in my shop.
You are frozen, Jeff.
Oh no! Can you see it? What about now?
Now you're back.
Oh, okay, that was weird. I don't know why that happened. So in the past, we've talked about Arthur Googie a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with that Misfits drummer, but Arthur was really passionate about cheeseburgers, so much so that he needed a second cheeseburger on tour, and he didn't get one, and he got into a big fight with Glenn. And so, real quick, I'm going to shamelessly plug this new T-shirt that I have in the shop for anybody who's interested, I'm so sorry that this is the t-shirt that pops up, because this is not how I want to show. Actually, I could show the design like this. Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. Ready? It's coming up right now. Check it out. Whoa, there we go. Now we got both of us. Look at this shirt. You cannot have another cheeseburger. There it is, people. It's taking all the elements that you might love and appreciate and admire about the Misfits, and it combines them into this fun shirt. Look at it. It's the golden arches that flow into a devil lock, and you can see some fiendish eyes behind them. And you can get it in a variety of colors and styles, but I would really recommend going with the classic tee. And as you can see, here it is right there, folks. There it is. You can get it in a variety of different colors. And all I will say is, as you know, all the work, or all the proceeds that come from these t-shirts go directly into the work that I do. So I'm putting that link in the chat. If anybody wants to pick up a t-shirt, feel free. Moving on. Okay, now that we've paid the bills. Also, please take a moment to like, subscribe, leave a comment, go to my website, click on some of the AdSense. Throw us a couple pennies in my AdSense account. That'd be very helpful. And make sure to subscribe to Greg's channel if you have not done so already. I'll have a link in the comments, or go check out the other episodes. We have a link in the comments over there. Yada, 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 1, 2, 3. Greg, what were we talking about before I did all that stuff?
Talking about Samhain and the evolution of post-punk and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So you get into Samhain. You're digging it. So let's go into. Tell me about the interview. How did you get the interview? How did you get into the zines, the journalism?
Okay, yeah, that's exactly that period. So summer of '84, it was June. I wasn't, like many people, I had started college and not really sure what I wanted to do, and I kind of switched majors a bunch of times. And I decided that I was really interested in doing journalism. And I was actually inspired by, as we said before, by reading Tim Summers' columns. He was really inspirational to me. His Village Voice columns in particular. I just thought he was a great writer, and he really inspired me. And Tim's friend at the time, this guy, Jack Rabid, I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Jack Rabbit's in my documentary. Okay. I interviewed him as well.
Jack was a big figure for me too, because he put out a fanzine called The Big Takeover that I subscribed to. And he was the first person in the New York City scene that kind of actually sort of took me under his wing a little bit. I remember writing him, and he sent me all these tapes with all these different bands. Like, he got me into a lot of these other early New York bands, like the Stimulators and the Mad and all these things. He would send me tapes. He'd send copies of his fanzine. He would, just give me advice about stuff. And I really liked his magazine. So between the two of them, I just thought, wow, I'd really like to try doing this, because I liked writing. So I started my own fanzine, and the first issue came out in June '84. It was called.
Pausing you 1 second. Sure. But in relation to what you're talking about, first, I just want to say, Jack Rabbit. Remember all the things that I said before about Tim Sommer. I want to equally praise Jack Rabbit as well. He is the other half of the coin that is Tim Sommer in relation, and those dudes are also friends, and yada yada yada, and that cannot be emphasized enough. Another dude who also speaks in perfect sound bites. Second thing, please explain for our audience and anybody else who watches this after we're done being live. I really think you need to emphasize and explain zines. Zine culture, zines as a way of getting that underground information that we were talking about that was hard to come by. Just all that stuff as you talk about that, because that's important.
You can see just from how many times I mentioned different people and their zines, between, Abby and her zine and Jack Rabbit's zine, whatever. That was like a huge part of the subculture. If you were into punk or alternative music at the time, there just was not a lot of mainstream coverage of it. There was no alternative press or spin or, even things that were later in the 80s or in the 90s. There just wasn't. It was rare that you'd get a write-up in any mainstream magazine. I mean, yes, some of them did, but it would be little things. Like I said, I subscribed to Cream even from before, when I was into metal and stuff as a teenager. But there would be little mentions. You'd hear about. I remember even before I got into punk, whatever, I'd see things about the Dead Boys occasionally, or I'd see something about the Sex Pistols or whatever, but it would be just here and there. But a band like the Misfits, just to use an example,
Right.
almost never. In fact, the one time I remember reading a review of the Misfits, it made me really angry because the writer just basically said they were clowns and a joke, and they were just like, Halloween dress up goofballs. And I just was like, he just didn't get it at all.
Right.
And, it made me really annoyed. So I think zines were something where, it filled that gap. It filled that hole that was there in terms of coverage of all these kind of bands. And it also gave people something creative to do. Like if you're a kid now and you want to be involved in music, you can start your own YouTube channel. You can do all kinds of different things, be an influencer on Instagram, whatever. Back then, if you wanted to get involved, you either were a musician or you did a zine, because that was how you connected with other people. That's how you kind of grew, that was the idea, was to grow the scene and spread the word about bands. And so it filled that function for the people, and it also for other people reading the zines, it was a source of news. It was a source of getting turned on to bands,
Right.
So it was a very important thing. And I think a lot of the people who later became music journalists, like myself and like Jack and all these other people, started in the zine world. So I started my zine, and it coincided with me going to these shows and taping them. But I hadn't really done any interviews. I think the first 2 issues were just reviews, live reviews, record reviews. That was about it. And I really wanted to start getting into doing interviews. I'd never done an interview in my life before. Well, okay. I think the only time me and a bunch of my classmates for our politics class in high school, we had to interview Noreen Ferraro, the one who ran for VP in '84. That was the only time I'd ever actually interviewed someone. So I didn't really know what the heck I was doing.
Right.
And I remember the Samhain show was coming up at Danzig, and I was really excited because I'd never seen the Misfits. So I'd never seen Glenn live before. And I was like, just, incredibly excited about finally getting to see what this was all about. And I thought, well, maybe I can cover it. Maybe I could do something more than just, to take pictures. My friend who I mentioned before, Jack Sheehy, and his other friend, Abby, who is Al Pike's wife, they were my connection for this, because Jack was like, help promote my fanzine. And he was like, why don't we try to get an interview with Glenn? He goes, Abby could probably hook us up.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. So I don't remember the details of how they did it, but Jack told Abby about it, and Abby asked Glenn, and Glenn was like, sure, no problem.
Wow.
So we went there early to Danzig. I remember we got there long before the show, and we were hanging. That picture that you showed before of Jack and Abby sitting in the Danzig, that was like at the end of the afternoon or something, like while we were just waiting around for Glenn to get ready to do the interview. So we went down, and I think it was, I want to say, it was obviously a backstage area, but I feel like it was like the basement. I just remember me and Jack and Glenn sitting in this like basement, like dressing room type room. And I had my this was before I bought like the Walkman that I used for all those other tapes later on. I was still using one of these old fashioned press button tape recorders, that's like shaped like this. And it was one of those things where you had to push play and record at just the right. It was like, at that point, it was like close to dying. I'd had it since I was a kid, and it didn't really work that well. And you had to just hit the things right. And somehow in my state of nervousness at actually meeting Glenn for the first time in person, I remember I pressed whatever it was I did, it just played and it didn't record. And I didn't find out until the next day when I went to transcribe the interview, and I'm like, where's all Glenn talking? And he was great too. He talked for us for like an hour. I mean, I showed you this list of questions. We had like probably like 40 questions for him, and he answered everything. He went and, he was like great. He was really nice to us, and I got nothing out of it. I was humiliated. But it was like, it taught me a good lesson, because that never happened to me again, because after that, I always tested the recorder and made sure it was working. Right. But the only good thing about it was that then I got to see like an incredible kick-ass Samhain show where they were just on fire. And I got to sit basically on the side of the stage, which is if you look at the video that I posted I posted a video of my audio because I audio taped the show. It's a different recording than the one that's in the Samhain box set. It has more songs.
So that show. Oh, can you turn your volume down or put headphones on or something? Because I'm getting a kickback.
I didn't change anything, but I'll turn my volume down. Is that better?
Hello. That's a little better.
Okay.
Oh no, I still hear myself. Here, I'll do this. That's a little better. Question. So it does exist.
What exists?
That show does exist outside of that was. I thought you were the only person that had recorded the show. That show is in the box set.
Yes, but it's in a truncated version on the box set. Not all of the songs are included. Wow. So if you listen to the version I posted on my YouTube channel, it's the entire show start to finish with all the extra songs that were not included. I'm not sure why they didn't include the whole thing, but it has more songs. So actually I had the tape recorder here, going, and I used to have a little what the heck did they call them? It was an old fashioned kind of camera that took really crappy kind of photos, but it was like cheap and it could get banged up pretty easily, so you could take it to shows. A disc camera, thank you.
Right.
Instead of the things being printed, they came out the negatives came out in a little disc, and you would give it to the photo guy, and they give you prints from it. So that took pictures in color. So I gave my disc camera to Jack Sheehy, who was in the front row, and right there in that picture you're looking at right now. So Jack took a few color photos, which you'll see at the beginning of my live video, from his view, because he was right under Glenn. I was on the side of the stage next to Pete on the stage right, and I recorded the show with my audio, and I took photos with my fancy black and white camera. So all the black and white photos that you'll see in my that's a photo I took of Jack. All the Samhain photos that you'll see in that video, which I also posted online, a lot of different places, those I took with my good black and white, the good black and white film and camera from the side of the stage.
In the actual video, let's pull it. I'm going to pull that up.
Sure. If you pull it up,
keep
you can
talking.
see
I'm going to pull it up. Keep talking.
And and the band was amazing. I mean, what else can I say? They were phenomenal. They were really, really tight. They just sounded great. Songs were great. So that kind of took the sting out of not getting my interview.
Wait, so did Glenn or anybody from that band, that camp, ever be like, "Hey, where's that interview?" Or it was just never?
No, I don't think no, because we were like a nothing little fanzine at the time, so I don't think he really cared. But when I did finally interview him a second time later, in '88 for Faces, I did mention it to him, and I did tell him, "Hey, I interviewed once before, and look what that's what happened." So I think I made some kind of joke, like, I got to make sure the tape works this time. There you go. So all these photos, those ones were taken, the color ones were taken by Jack from the front row.
Yeah.
And then all the other ones after that, all the black and white ones.
Yeah, I'm pressing play now. Let me see if I can pull it up. Oh, there we go. There's another one. There's another one. Are you frozen?
No, I'm just watching along with you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the black and white ones are the ones that I took.
Wow.
And there's some really, really pretty good ones in there.
Has anybody ever tried to license your photos from you?
No.
Huh. I'm very surprised. There are lots of collectors out there that always are looking for sets of, Samhain and Misfits and Danzig stuff. So if you ever decided you want to go that route, there's a whole market for photos like
this. It's a nice one. That was a nice one of Erie.
Yeah, I like that. And I love the vampire, his count vampire thing he's got going on. Glenn really liked those black knitted sweaters.
Yep. And he got Pete into them too, because if you remember from the Brain Eaters video.
Right.
Keith's wearing the same thing.
Right. And that's Jack. And he's like, they're having a moment. Glenn, look at that pose that he's in. That's hilarious. There's a GIF of Glenn from How the Gods Kill video where he's just violently humping the air. Glenn was really into violently humping air. Like, not in like it's almost kind of like the anti-Michael Jackson, if you think about it. Like, it's just really, like, he just really, like, you see it in that last Samhain show. Like, he just really got into violently humping air. I don't know. Just thought it was pretty funny. So the interview, do you remember? All right, let's try and jog your memory. What do you remember? Here, we'll do some through the internet hypnotization. What do you remember about this interview? Do you remember anything that you asked? You asked him about Misfits stuff.
You're welcome to. I know I emailed it to you. If not,
you emailed me questions?
I emailed you our actual question sheet that me and Jack asked him that had all our questions on it.
I must have missed that. Let me take a look right now.
Sure.
I must have, because I downloaded all the documents you sent me. I must have missed it.
Pink. It's a pink sheet of paper. I remember for some reason.
Weird.
Let me see if I might be able to find it. Let's see where it is.
Oh, you sent me the questions. That's awesome.
Yep.
Oh man, I wish I would have added that to my photo collage right now. In any case, so you asked him a bunch of questions. It didn't go down. We went into everything. I think we asked him about all the early recordings. I think I'm trying to think. One of the songs we had heard about, we might have heard about Return of the Fly and asked him about that, if he was ever going to release it, because I think Jack had heard somehow about it. Right.
And we were asking him about horror movies. We were asking him if they were going to make a video. We asked them, a lot of stuff about how he felt about the difference between Misfits and Samhain. We talked about the post-punk influence, all that kind of stuff. Of course, I just don't have it to post because I got to be honest with you, man. I'm not seeing it here. I'm not seeing it here in this thread. Maybe, I don't know. Unless I sent it to you on Facebook message.
You might have sent it to me on Facebook message. I'll check later. It's not, you know what, we kind of got through that. And I'm so sorry. Did you say your friend Jack is no longer with us anymore?
No, Jack is alive and well.
Oh, okay. There was another friend who was not. By the way,
the person who was deceased was the bassist in my school band. Yeah.
Right. Abby was in the book. She is featured a whole bunch in the book Scream With Me, which was done by Tom Begowitz and Umberto, who is a huge collector out of Long Island. And Abby has contributed a lot to that book. I don't know if you've read the book, but her quotes are all over it.
But you should check it out. That doesn't surprise me because, here's something that I saw you put up before, and I'll tell you about this. The final issue of my fanzine, which came out in January '86, featured a Misfits photo collage from Abby's collection that she gave me. And at the time, none of those photos had been published. And I think you brought it up on the screen.
Right. Let's bring it back.
It was a 2-page spread. And those were all Abby's photos.
Wow. I've never seen this photo ever. This Devilock one here at the, you can't, sorry. Ha! I'm looking at it on my thing. I didn't reshare it. I'm so sorry. Boom.
Yep, there it is.
I've never seen. I had it. Oh God. I don't think I've ever seen this photo. And I don't think I've ever seen this photo. So these might still be unreleased. These two. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Can't say I'm memorized every single. Look at Greg's record collection here, guys. Look at this thing. I mean, he's just got. It's like. Look there, look at that damn 7-inch up there. It must be very, I don't know how many times you've moved over the years, but I'm sure that
a bunch of times.
It must have been stressful carting this collection around, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I can't even imagine. And there's you.
That's getting a Misfits shirt for my birth. I think it was my 21st birthday. 87 might have been 86 or 87.
Yeah, I have that same shirt. Great shirt. Great shirt. That's by Pusset. So the guy who drew this has like probably the greatest, most epic interview with Glenn of all, where Glenn admits that he can do things with his mind, although he didn't sound quite as raspy at that point in time.
If you go back, if you scroll down the other way, I think there's a second page to that spread from the fanzine.
Yes, there was this page, and then there's this page.
Yep, that's the other one.
Right. Yeah, this photo I think looks pretty familiar, but I don't think I've seen any of these photos, man. Truly, I don't know.
Those were all straight from her collection. She lent me them to use.
This one might have been taken by Erie. Maybe that one was in one of the cave that they did. I don't know. Here's the problem, and you talked about we touched on this, and I forgot to come back to this. I really think that they sealed their fate as a band that could sound good live when they kicked Bobby Steele out of the band. And it's funny that beef with Bobby maybe with Jerry it began when they kicked Bobby out of the band. But with Glenn was financing Bobby's first recordings in the Undead. The Undead were going to put out their EP. The first Undead release was going to come out on Plan 9. And then Tim Somer did that article and wrote some very flattering things about Bobby that really pissed off Glenn. And that is, so we can blame, it's Tim Somer's fault. It's not Tim's fault. No, we're just kidding, Tim. But Tim wrote no, Tim was just trying to be flattering to the Undead. Like, Glenn didn't like that. Glenn took that the wrong way. And that was the end of their relationship, because from then on, it was this whole thing about, he talked a lot of crap about us, and Bobby's always told the story as and the notion, the thing was that was said in the thing was that Bobby has done more in the 6 months in the Undead than the Misfits have done in the last 3 years. That really pissed off Glenn to the point where they kind of like had this falling out. But it's just kind of funny how it's in a Tim Somer thing. But I really think that it was the biggest mistake in the world to bring. I mean, obviously, Doyle is such a big part of the picture, but like bringing Doyle into the picture and booting Bobby, like saw that decline in live sound. Right,
yeah, the musicality was diminished a lot.
Yeah, it was probably the inevitable. It was the death kiss that would lead to the inevitable demise. As a matter of fact, Danzig, to segue right into the next thing that I want to talk to you about, Danzig says so to you personally in that interview. He talks about it. Talks about how for almost 3. I mean, he talks about how it was just impossible with those guys, the way that they played live, the way that they banged those instruments. He says it in the Faces interview. And, if you think about it, what's left unsaid is that he suffered in one way, shape, or form in this way for 3 years, because that's how long Doyle and Jerry were in that band with him for. You know what I mean? So he soldiered on that way and did the majority of the touring that he would do in the Misfits in that incarnation. What would have things have been like? I love doing this game where we play what if. What would things have been like if Bobby had done those 3 years of touring instead of Doyle, or if Doyle, who is a fantastic rhythm guitar player, Doyle is not bad at rhythm guitar. He could do a rhythm guitar, okay? Put him on rhythm guitar, and then have Bobby doing all that secret weapon stuff, just like all the little flourishes. Let Bobby do the lead, take the lead on things. Where would the band have gone? You know what I mean? They probably would have soared to heights that beyond what they had. Is what I think personally. But that's just my opinion. I don't know.
We kind of know what that might have sounded like listening to 12 Hits from Hell.
Precisely, and we and
is amazing.
Yes, love 12 Hits from Hell. We've done a whole in-depth episode about it. Interesting fact: when Henry Rollins was doing a whole thing on his Harmony in the Head show, I did not know this. Henry was not just featured on the live Evilive recording. I'm about to sneeze. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. I think another one's coming. He was also. Thank you. He's also doing gang vocals on We Bite.
Oh.
With a bunch of the guys from the Necros, which I did not know. Nobody knew that until Henry said that on his radio show. That kind of blew my mind. I didn't know that Henry was actually featured on any recordings. But yeah, that 12 hits from Hell, man, is a testament to what maybe might have could have been. And once again, in talking about that pattern that we were talking about like, you know, Static Age didn't come out, this didn't come out, that didn't come out, 12 hits never came out, or 12 hits turned into Walk Among Us. So all right, so you really explode in your journalism. You start doing all sorts of interviews and stuff. And I've seen from your archive, you've interviewed a whole slew of musicians and you know, taped a bunch of shows and written a bunch of articles and things. And then how did the Faces article, you kind of explained it a little bit on your Facebook post, but just go over it for me again. What
well, in 87 I graduated from college and I had a journalism degree, so I went looking for work as, you know, I wanted to be a music journalist. At that time, Faces was this metal magazine in River Edge, New Jersey, and it was the only one hiring. So I was like, okay. It was my first real job out of college, and immediately I was thrust into this whirlwind of just interviewing all these, you know, fairly big musicians that I liked. It was really cool. I mean, I got to meet some of my childhood heroes. Like, you know, some of them were great, like Alice Cooper. I always like to tell this story. One of my most fun things was I went to interview him at his hotel, and when I got there, he was like, "Hey, would you just like to sit and watch TV for a while before we do the interview?" And I was like, "Okay." So he put on daytime TV, and for like an hour, we just sat there watching game shows.
Why?
And that was like a great moment.
But why? Like again, really great.
He just
moment.
felt like it. He just felt like it.
He just wanted to hang out.
Yeah, we talked about horror movies and stuff, but for the most part, no, we just watched the game shows for an hour, and then he was ready to do the interview. But he was like so nice. He was just like a normal guy, and he was just so much fun. And then you had your other side where, you know, I grew up worshiping Black Sabbath and was really excited to interview Ozzy, and unfortunately, I got drugged out Ozzy, who freaked out, and like 5 minutes into the interview, he flew into a rage because I didn't have headphones. Because, you know, I was asking him about his new album, and he was like, "Well, I'll play it for you. Here's a tape, an advanced tape." And I'm like, "Well, I don't have headphones. You know, Walkmans you couldn't just play. There was no speaker." And I kept telling him, I can't play it, you know, just tell me about it. You know, what's the new album like, blah, blah, blah. After 5 minutes, he just flew into a rage. He's like, and he stood up and he left. And his publicist came walking in and was like, "I'm so sorry," whatever. And, you know, at the time I was young. I didn't know what was going on. And I heard later, that was during a period where he was like whacked out of his mind. So, you know, it was like an exciting time, but, you know, it was like interviewing all these people.
Question.
Yep.
Let's say Ozzy hands you the tape. You have a time machine, Greg. You can go back in time. Ozzy hands you the tape. You're now older and wiser than you were before. You have the armchair insight, the armchair quarterback insight that you didn't have in the moment. Because and this is so true amongst human nature. When things happen to us in the moment, we either we freeze up, we're confused, our brains can't process information fast enough. And I'm saying because I'm not trying to just say you, I'm saying us, all of us as a human race. We get like, I know it's happened to me so many times, and I like can't process something or blah, 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 blah. And then it's only after the situation that it's happened that I can really think about it and go, "Oh, I should, you know, that, you know, some of, you know, I would have done this, I would have done that, blah, blah, blah." What if, and again, this is some decades later speculation. What if Ozzy handed you the tape? You could go back in time. You could plan out what you would do. Ozzy hands you the tape. Is he belligerent enough that you would have taken that tape? Did you have did you actually have a Walkman? You just didn't have headphones? right?
Because what I used back then to record my interviews was
Right.
Walkman, and you put it had like one of those little mics that you
Right.
put into the input.
Right.
And that's how I did them. But I didn't carry around, if I was going to an interview, I didn't carry around headphones because what would I need them for?
Right. So here's my question. And it's not a question that you can necessarily answer, but I find it to be an amusing rhetorical question. Ozzy hands you the tape, right? He's like, "Oh, just listen to my tape," you take the tape and you say, "But Ozzy, I don't have any headphones." And he goes, No, just listen to the tape. And this goes back and forth. And then you just go, "Okay, Ozzy." And you put it in your thing and you just press play and just sit there for a minute and go, "This is really good, Ozzy. This is really great."
He probably would have just went with that. You're right.
He would have just went with it, right? He wouldn't have even noticed.
Exactly.
He would have just gone, and you could have bullshitted him. You could have been just been like, Ozzy, so tell me about the guitars. Because it has guitars. You don't have to listen to it to know it has guitars. And it'll be like, "Oh man, my guitars." and you're like, "Oh, Ozzy, what about the drums? Oh, the drums. You know what I mean? Like, he just never would have even wouldn't have even noticed, man. He just would have been so drugged out. That would have been great. That coulda, shoulda, woulda, but didn't, man. Whatever,
So
so you're doing interviews.
Yeah, I'm doing these interviews, and it was basically we had pretty much of a skeleton editorial crew. It was basically me, who was the assistant editor, and the editor in chief was a woman named Lorena Alexander.
Right.
And pretty soon after I signed on there, I turned her on to the Misfits and Glenn and Sam and everything, and she loved it immediately. So the two of us, it was like something we bonded over, and we were both, we played them all day in the office. And so this was 87. Now, I remember I wanted to mention this to you, but I have a pretty good memory, but this is murky for me. Somehow and some way, somebody played me, some music business person played me tapes of the Samhain and Danzig transition around that time period. Like, I want to say it was like fall or winter of 87. It was around there, and I can't remember who it is. I just have this memory of being in somebody's studio and them playing me like in the recording studio, some of them playing, like, saying, "Oh, you want to hear what Glenn's doing next?" And them playing me a few songs. Like, I remember hearing Trouble, and I know I heard Trouble. I'm not sure which other ones. It was those early tracks that are on Final Descent.
Okay, so I suspect, and again, this is like the most nerdy of all speculation. I have absolutely no idea. I could be so wrong, Greg, so wrong. But if I had to guess, based on things that have surfaced over the years, you might have been listening to a well-known rehearsal tape that was out there from 1987. I believe it's gone under titles such as Life Without a Net, I think. And it has When Death Had No Name. It has Trouble. It has Possession. It has a bunch. I think Twist of Cain is on there. There's about 7 or 8 songs, maybe. I believe, again, don't quote me on this, I think London May is still the drummer. I think it's John Christ on guitar and London May is the drummer. They haven't even gotten Chuck Biscuits yet. So it's like, it's really in this transition. As you said, it's a super transitional year where they're still playing some, well, I don't know I haven't listened to that tape in a really, 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 really long time. So maybe it will sound more Danzig-y. But again, going back to Final Descent, we've talked about this on that Danzig interview episode of that second half of Final Descent is the connective tissue. That's where you get to see Twist of Cain as a Samhain song. And then you go, oh, this is the jump. And you also really see, in my personal opinion, you see Rick Rubin's influence. Glenn can take all the credit that he wants, Uncle Glenn. He can take as much credit as he wants, but Rick Rubin helped them with that Danzig sound. He helped shape that in some way, shape, or form. And so, yeah, that's a testament. But yes, I was giggling when you were talking about that because I'm going like, does he not know like this? Does Greg not know like Glenn's like temperament towards like, you know, people hearing things that maybe they're not supposed to hear? But
the only thing I'll say is, I can't remember who it was, but it wasn't like a fan or just somebody like, it was somebody official. Like, because by that point I was in the music business. I was working for a magazine. Someone played it to me as a, this is what's coming up.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't like a, you know, sketchy kind of thing. It was like,
so maybe it wasn't that tape. Maybe it was something. No, maybe you heard something else.
I think that's probably what it was. I think that's probably that sounds like what it was to me. I just remember hearing it and like, because it wasn't something that I was given. I don't have it. It was something that someone actually was in a recording studio and like said, "Oh, here's a preview. Check this out. What they're working."
I bet you that leaked, man. I bet you that whoever had that tape or whatever was loose with it at some point, and that's how that got out. But that's probably what was being played to like drum up interest about, what Glenn is going to do next. Now, what's very interesting about this interview, and again, first of all, both of your articles, you both write half of the article or whatever. They're both great. You stroke the Danzig ego, you know. Not saying that was your intention, but like, you know, it was just very because you're an admirer of Glenn as I am an admirer of Glenn, like, you know.
Sure.
It was a wonderful read is my point.
Thank you.
And the interview is very interesting because here's why the interview is so interesting. Again, I really go more in depth into this in the previous episode. Check that out at some point. But just a quick overview. This is Glenn at a time 2 months after Danzig 1 comes out, right? So this is super duper early in the career. Glenn is not, and like, maybe you can speak to this, Greg. I don't know. I'd love to hear your insight on this. I talked about this a little bit. At some point, maybe it's in 1990, maybe it's in 1991, maybe it's in 1992. But from that point until maybe about 2005, 2006, 2007-ish, like, you cannot talk to Glenn Danzig about the Misfits. Like, you just cannot. That dude, it becomes an uber serious version. He's at the height of his powers in like 94. Like, God forbid someone bring up the Misfits. And they do. And you see the videos and you see how he kind of either cringes or he kind of like, you know, he takes it on the chin and answers the question politely, but it's agonizing. And then, of course, there's the Ricky Rackman stuff where those guys were breaking Glenn's balls by asking those questions. But what's interesting about your interview is because you got to him so early, he's so chill. He's so relaxed. He's so laid back. It's really a Danzig that you don't see in many interviews. He's different from the Pushead Samhain interview. He just seems more mature, more hardened by the business, maybe. I don't know. But what was the energy and atmosphere going into that interview? Like, what like, tell me about it.
It was very relaxed. I mean, I think because I had actually, you know, interviewed him once before and had met him, and Lorena was a very genial, amiable person, kind of put him at ease. I think the fact that he knew that we were both hardcore fans rather than just, you know, these typical, I think probably other metal magazines interviewing him at the time, you know, maybe they weren't really very knowledgeable about his whole history. I think we just put him at ease. I mean, we were also on home turf. You know, our offices were, I mean, we did the interview in the city, but he knew our magazine was in River Edge, which was 15 minutes away from Lodi. And I think, you know, Lorena was a native New Jerseyite, whatever. So I think he was just, you know, I don't think he felt defensive. He was relaxed. He was in his element. He knew we got him, and so he could just relax and talk. But to be totally honest, though, I mean, I haven't heard the Pushead thing in a long time, but he was also pretty much like that in '85. That's the Samhain interview that didn't come out with me and Jack. He was pretty relaxed too. I mean, I know I've seen other things where he's kind of truculent and argumentative or stonewalls people. He wasn't like that with me. I can't say why, but he was relaxed, and I think you definitely hit on something. He he was still comfortable at that point talking about the Misfits because I think he saw it as all three bands were an evolution of his work.
Right.
I think maybe after that, once that whole thing started to really go into high gear with the lawsuit with Jerry and all that stuff, maybe that soured him on the whole Misfits thing for a while. Yeah, someone else is saying that right there.
Right. That could be because
but
of
I
the
think in
lawsuit.
88
Yeah.
at the time, at the time we were doing that, that really wasn't so much of a factor. So he, look, he was still doing Misfits songs live with Danzig at the time.
Right.
I think he saw it just as part of the evolution of Glenn rather than that's a different subject we can't talk about.
Right. Oni says that could be because of the lawsuit with Jerry and Glenn was probably fed up about Misfit questions. I'm sure that was a part of it. It's the Marty says, these are great stories. When's the book coming out? Did you ever interview Waddy or Deep Purple?
No, I'm a big fan of both the Exploited and Deep Purple, but I never got to interview either of them, alas.
Alas. But he did get to interview Ozzy.
Yes.
Dude, that's such a great story, man. You got such a good story out of it. And, it would have been funny. It would have been so funny. Like, he just hands you the tape. You just put the tape and you're like, wow, Ozzy, that's so great. And he's like, oh, you like it? And you're like, yeah. I'm just like making up fan fiction about your life. Like, so okay. So yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. That's that's surely what it sounded like. And now the real revelation, the real gem in this interview, probably more than any other thing, is this moment where you bring up Talus, which absolutely had my jaw drop because the only place you ever hear about Talus is from Misfit Central, and we never know where the reference came from. I always assume that came from an interview with Glenn that Mark Kennedy at one point, Mark Kennedy finally, that's the guy who founded Misfit Central, which is the hub of all Misfits knowledge, and for this mysterious band that yet unironically, like everybody knows so much minutia about this band that still yet somehow is so mysterious. In the year 2000, I think it was, Mark sat down with Glenn because Glenn was sick of the internet. He was like, oh, everybody on the internet was fucking shit. They don't know nothing. What do they know? They don't know anything about me. So he sat down with Mark Kennedy and basically set him straight on every single thing. So I always thought that Talus came from that. But from after what I heard in your interview, I think Talus came from Glenn told them about Talus. Glenn told whoever was writing that bio, right?
Yeah, he must have, because I read it and I said, I don't know anything about this. I could ask him,
dude. And there you have Glenn talking about a pre-Misfits band, which we never get to really hear. I mean, he kind of talks a little bit about it in the Pusshead, but that absolutely, as a Danzigologist, that absolutely blew my mind because I was like, holy crap. This is where that Talus probably comes from. It not necessarily the interview, but it's from a bio. They were like, Glenn, we need to do a bio. This is Glenn's. And again, I do this sometimes. I don't actually know any of this stuff. This is just me speculating. So someone comes to Glenn and is like, okay, Glenn, you're doing now that you're part of this, signed on this label, you have to have a bio. You got to do a bio. So write something. And Glenn, is not writing the BS kind of Static Age bio that he wrote for Jerry and himself, which you can find in that Scream With Me book also. Really fun stuff, but taking it more seriously. And so then thinking in his head, okay, well, this is what I was doing before the Misfits or something. And that's how he pulls that name out of his ass. Because before that, nobody, is aware or hear it. And here's the thing that's so interesting. This guy really doesn't care as much about his past as maybe he just really doesn't, in the sense of this, Greg. There are Misfit songs there were tons of Misfit songs that they had done that they never properly recorded.
Those early 77 ones, you mean?
Yeah, early 77 ones that were never recorded. They were only taped because Manny liked to play back the shows. So he had a tape deck. He was recording the shows on a boombox or something off of the stage, or no, I think it was actually soundboard. And so he inadvertently recorded Misfit songs from the earliest stages of the band, but that were never recorded or never mentioned anywhere, and wouldn't be until Manny started playing the tape. He played the tape for me. I got to hear them. And it was like, I heard all these Misfit songs that just never existed. And Glenn just didn't give a crap to ever talk about them, to ever mention them or anything. They just would have been lost to time. And for an archivist like you and an archivist like me, the idea that there's a Misfit song, there's a Misfit song called Infant Stranger, Lullaby, I mean, this is crazy. Like, it's just, it blows my mind. And so to hear another little shred of that history in Talus was just really fun and really, really exciting. So you do the interview, and then I guess you did answer this question somewhere else. I think maybe it was on your Facebook. That photo is from the show that you went to sometime later.
Yes. I'm sorry. Could you rephrase that?
Just that the photo that's on that's on the YouTube video that I exported for you. Remember, you sent me that photo.
Oh, the photo of me and Glenn and Lorena.
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was thinking that you meant the photo in the article.
No.
Where that came from? No, that was from 2 months later when we went to see the Danzig show at the Ritz in December. Okay. And we, Glenn had invited us backstage, and at that point I thought, well, why don't I get a pic? I don't know, maybe it was Lorena. One of us said, why don't we get a picture? And Glenn was nice enough to, be like, sure, let's take a picture.
Yeah. But what's funny is that when I was looking at the photo, I'm going, wait a minute, Glenn doesn't have his shirt on. And they did the interview I was like, wait a minute, did Glenn just take off his shirt in the middle of the interview? Well, they were just doing the interview, and Glenn's like, whoa, no, I got to take off my shirt, and then they took a picture of him with his shirt off. I was trying to figure that out. And what's interesting too is during the recording, you can hear who was doing the drumming on the glass table? Is that Glenn being antsy or something? Uh-oh, we got to pause. No. Did we lose? Did I get lost, or has Greg been lost? Who's lost, everybody? Here, let me jettison this. Maybe that will help. Hello. Can anybody hear? Can anybody tell me what's going on? Am I still here? Is Greg still here? Anybody? Am I frozen? Hello. What's going on? Oh, Greg is frozen. Okay. Greg, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna let's see what happens when I'm just gonna remove you for a second. Oh no, we lost him. Greg, come back. Crap. We just lost. I just booted him by accident. Hold on 1 second. Let's get him back. I can get him back in 2 seconds. Hold the phone. He'll be back in just a moment. This was really fun, man. Okay, you can still hear me. Yeah, that's my fault that Greg is gone. I'm going to get him back right now. Hold on 1 second. Greg is just full of fascinating information. Hold on real quick. We're going to get him back. Greg, I booted you by accident. Come back. Come back, Greg. Okay, I'll try email. Oh, there he is. There you are. Okay, cool.
My laptop power unexpectedly died, and I needed to get a cord. So sorry about that. I didn't realize we'd been talking for almost 2.5 hours, and I was like, "Oh, my laptop's dying." And I thought I had 10 more minutes. I thought I was going to ask you, should I go run get something? And then all of a sudden, it just went died.
Well, we're winding down here. I wanted to. Yeah, well, you paused like this. You were like, and I was like, Greg, this is all you were doing. So it was really weird. No, we're actually winding down here. I wanted to finish our. By the way, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
This was a pleasure for me too. I really enjoyed this thoroughly. I wanted to finish this off since we've done 2 unreleased things. We have to finish our Return of the Jedi episode off with something else that's unreleased that Greg brought to my attention. So Greg, first of all, why don't you finish off the Danzig section of the story by telling us about the contest?
Oh, sure. Well, at the time we did the interview, Lorena and I thought, we sometimes did contests with the magazine. We thought, well, this would be kind of fun to do something, see what we could get Glenn to do. And we asked him about it, and he said, oh, I've got all these skulls. How about I give him like a cow skull, and I could get the whole band to sign it? And we thought that was an awesome idea. So, like, as soon as we were putting the issue together, we came up with this whole thing, win a skull from Glenn's collection, and you had to like tell him why you deserve to have it or why you would want it, and he got to pick the best one. And we got in a ton of responses. Like, I had a whole bag full of them, and I think I told you privately, it was just a fun day that I think it was in February of '89.
Yeah.
Their rehearsal studio, he was still in in New Jersey, hadn't moved to California, I guess, yet, because their rehearsal studio was still in Lodi, and that was like 15 minutes away from my office. So he's like, oh, come by, bring over the bag, and I'll give you the skull, and then I'll let you know which one is the winner. So I went down to the studio, and it was kind of like an awesome moment for me. I was like, wow, these guys are actually like rehearsing in here. And it was like a living, it was in a house. It wasn't in like a professional.
Was it in Lodi? It was in Lodi.
It was in Lodi.
Okay.
And
was it 49 MacArthur Avenue?
I don't remember. I just remember I remember saying hi to Erie. I remember I wanted to talk to Chuck because I had been a big fan of Circle Jerks, and I loved his drumming in Circle Jerks, and I wanted to tell him that, but he was like very occupied with like I think setting up his drums or tuning his drums. He wasn't really that talkative. But Glenn was really nice, and Glenn was like excited to see how many responses we got. He was like, I guess he didn't think that many people would want this skull, and it was like this whole bag of things. And he gave me the skull, and I brought it back to the office, and we kept it there. And then he decided who won, and I mailed it out. And we found out, you actually know the person who won it. So what I did was, we got in so many hilarious responses. So.
Wait, before you get to the hilarious response, I just want to, by the way, I saw your private message. So sorry. I must have not seen it initially. I saw your message about the power thing. No, my question is just about the rehearsal space you were in. It was a house.
In my memory, it was like a basement room or
I think you were in Glenn's parents' house. I'm possible. Like, dude, I think you were in like the hub of where like all the Misfits and Samhain stuff happened. It was covered. Was there? It was
it was about this. I remember the room where they were rehearsing was about the size of this basement I'm in now. It was not huge. And
toys, like junk, like posters.
No, it was pretty empty. In my memory, It was like just like an empty basement type room.
Okay, maybe it wasn't then.
So I couldn't really say. Okay. It could have also been a very like super low tech kind of studio. It just was not like a one of these things where there was a million other bands rehearsing and going in and out. It was like they were the only people there.
Gotcha.
It was just It was just their space.
Gotcha.
And,
okay.
I feel like it was more like a house than a professional studio type thing.
Gotcha. Okay, so in any case, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
Oh, that's right.
About the
Well, Lorena and I had like a thing where whenever we'd get like amusing things, we would photocopy them and stick them up around the office. Like we always had polls in the magazine, so when someone would say something ridiculous, we'd stick it up. So this time we were like, we got to save some of these. So right. I picked out about maybe the 24 funniest, weirdest responses. And before I gave them to Glenn, I put them all in our photocopier, and I made I collaged them all and to save them just for amusement.
Archivist.
And I dug them up, and I have them. It's like, here they are.
Yes. He has people. He has the letters written to Danzig, like describing why they need to get the cow skull. So real quick, it was Tank. It was Jonathan Grimm, who again, this is like one of the biggest Danzig collectors. They used to say it was like an urban legend around Virginia. They'd say, "Oh, Danzig, does Danzig live in Virginia? I heard he was walking around in the mall," because Tank used to dress. Tank is a cosplayer, but he used to dress as Danzig when he was heavily into Danzig. Everybody thought that Danzig lived in Virginia, So it was like this is the guy who won. Now, here's my question to you specifically, because this is what he had told me. He said that he waited till the last minute. I believe this is what he said in his interview. He waited until the last minute to send it in because he wanted his. Or maybe it was he tried to make his as bulky and as heavy as possible because he wanted his thing to be the most prominent on the pile. Do you remember that being the case when you're delivering that stuff and his entry was like this thing that was not like the other ones?
I don't remember it sticking out in terms of being on the top because we probably jumbled them all up. I remember though that it was the one that was the creepiest. Maybe that's why Glenn picked it, because it was written. I mean, it looked like it was written in blood, and I remember at the time being like, "Oh, I don't know if I even want to touch this. Like, where did this come from?"
It might have been blood. I think it might have been at blood. I have to check the tape. I think it might have actually been blood.
And it was. I don't remember the details. I don't think I saved that one because it was blood, so I couldn't photocopy it well. But it was. I just remember it was really disturbing. It was like getting something, it made you like, whoa. So I could see why Glenn picked it because it was the weirdest one.
He still has that. Cow skull.
That's great.
I've seen it. I have seen this cow skull. So in any case, so that's the special surprise. That's the last unreleased ingredient. What were you expecting? Rare Misfits demos? Well, screw you, people. Like, come on, this guy is dug out to the bottom of the well and brought us another unseen treasure. So here it is. It is unreleased Letters to Danzig. Greg is going to read some of his favorite ones, and So Greg, I'll let you take the driver's seat. Go ahead. Go ahead and read something.
Okay. And I mean, I assume since these people sent this in publicly, use it, as long as they're not saying anything terrible, I can probably just say who they are.
Okay. Whatever you feel most comfortable with. I just think if there is anything salacious or whatever, that it should remain anonymous. And again,
absolutely.
You are more than welcome to read whatever you'd like on the air, as long as we respect people's privacy, I think, which we both agreed to. So
sure.
Okay.
All right. So here's some funny ones. Now, this one I like. This is a guy named Dennis from Toledo, Ohio.
Okay.
And Dennis writes, I want the monstrous skull for my own because its presence would be the bane of the feculence in my life and would fill me with the ichor of gods.
That's great. That's awesome.
And that one was quite good.
And I love how Glenn was like, no, not good enough. Not enough blood. No way.
This one sent a picture of his tattoo. Let's see if we can see this here. My tattoo.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This was another really artistic one. Let's see. There we could see that one. That one was actually from a guy I know, a friend of mine named John Soto. So I know I can say this one. He says, February 7th, 1989. Glenn, I have this insanely scary deer skull on the ground outside my house. There is a floodlight behind it. It projects a gruesome, distorted image, which is roughly 15 feet high on the side of my very visible apartment. And then he says, rip the heads off little deers, project them on my wall. Great contest idea. Have fun. If I don't win, I'd really appreciate the Where Eagles Dare 45. Thanks, John.
You mean only the rarest? Yeah, the Where Eagles Dare 45 is super rare.
This one's great. This is from Kyle Hansen of Perry, Utah.
Okay.
Danzig is the most evil bitchin' thing I know. I want to be like him. When I listen to him, I go into a mind-dazzling, gut-ripping, brain-smashing feeling.
Yeah.
P.S. Those pictures are another reason I want the skull. I am always thinking about them. Okay.
There you go.
This one's a nice one. This one's great. This is from Sherry Eisenberg.
Ooh, okay.
I would die for a skull from Glenn. I would use it in my Satanistic shrine at home. Then I would call to Satan, Saintin, for power as I sip the blood from a pesky bystander. Satanistically yours, Sherry.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thanks, Sherry.
Oh, this one's great. From Sean Terwilliger of Emmaus, Pennsylvania. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. 1,000 years have passed since we crossed paths. As wolves, we feasted under a full November moon. The blood we spilled together still runs fresh in my mind.
Oh my God! Why didn't he pick that one? That one's great. He talked about the November moon. Wolves, blood.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, that was good.
Joe Bunting of Graham, North Carolina wrote, "It's something that Satan would like for Christmas. It's a great gift for anyone and everyone. It's so sick." All right.
You know, she abided by the 30-word limit. You said no more than 30 words, and she sounds like she came in under the gun. So, you know.
Let's see. Yeah, this one is very interesting here. Okay. This is from Ruben Plaza of Brooklyn. He says, I would like to be a recipient of a skull from Glenn Danzig's personal collection because, first of all, Danzig is awesome and they are truly the best. And I also have a skull collection that is big, but without his skull, it would be incomplete and it would be the main subject in my collection. And I use my skulls in occultic practices.
Oh,
Danzig is the core of all evilness and they effing rule.
Oh.
Danzig is the root of all evil.
Oh.
They are lords in their own evil dimension. But to have a skull from Glenn Danzig's collection and to add to mine would be the ultimate completion. Danzig is deadly. They fill the crops of evil throughout this whole entire land. Their music is devastating to the human ear and pure chaotic destruction to the demons that lurk through the dark sides. But the main thing is Danzig effing rules.
You know what's funny? You know what I'm like imagining when I hear that one and like some of these in general? I feel like I'm listening to like a seventh grader's book report. Like this is like a homework assignment that they have to read in front of the whole class. That's what it sounded like.
May I read a few more?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
This is from Randy Sutherland. Looks like he's from Michigan, I think.
Yeah.
He says, to Glenn Danzig, my skull I would trade for one from your collection. And when people would see it, they would fall to their knees and beg for their life and freedom to enter and walk within your world.
That would appeal to Glenn, especially when you really buttered him up in your interview when you talked about when you were talking about like your world versus my world, yada yada yada, that whole thing. He loved hearing that. He ate that up. So
here's the most creative one.
Okay,
from Lainey Houston of Phoenix, Arizona, and she writes, the skull would make an excellent educational toy for my 4-year-old. His father and I like to encourage the hands-on approach to learning whenever possible.
And Glenn just wants to encourage young children to, learn things. So, that would work. That would work really great.
Let's see. Yeah, this one. Here's a nice one. Hi, my name is Patricia Stickler. The reason why I would want to be the recipient of a skull from Glenn Danzig's personal collection is because I love everything about him and his music, and I think he is fine as... I would give anything to get anything from him.
Oh, boy.
Yep. Besides, it's not every day a girl has a chance like this. That one's not too salacious.
That one's not too salacious.
On the edge, but
that was modest. Considering.
I will not read the ones from the Lodi girls because several. As I showed you earlier, there's several entries from these very nice ladies in Lodi who maybe they know. I actually looked them up just to see because I was like, should I mention them? It looks like they're all friends with Steve.
Yeah, let's. Yeah, I'm
So,
sure that that would be not
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Let's
But we'll just
not.
leave it. We'll leave it to the audience's imagination what these
Yes,
women wrote.
yes. That was truly, that was marvelous. That was such a treat, such the cherry on the top of the sundae that completes our Greg Fasolino trilogy of Danzigness, of Misfits, of all things Misfits, Danzig, Samhain. Let's end with this question. If you had to pick your top 5 Misfits, Samhain, and Danzig tracks, just 5, what would they be?
Well, as much as I love Samhain and Danzig, some of his solo stuff, they would probably all be Misfit songs because that's just where my greatest passion would be.
Okay.
But I could tell you that because I'm one of these people that loves making lists.
Okay.
And I make lists constantly. And I have like playlists where I pick like my favorite songs on Spotify, for example. So I would say my favorites in rough order would be, you said 5 you want?
Yeah, give me 5.
Horror Business, Night of the Living Dead, Hybrid Moments, Teenagers from Mars, and Children in Heat.
Oh, dude, Children in Heat is constantly, I mean, I love all Misfit songs, but Children in Heat, I don't know what it is about that song. I think it's just one of the best Misfit songs out there. It's just so good. And now one follow-up question about that in particular. You have to introduce, someone's never heard of the Misfits before. You're going to introduce them to the Misfits, and you want a song that best represents the original version of the band in those 7 years. You can only pick one track, and it's got to be the track that sells them on the band, that encapsulates the entire sound.
Night of the Living Dead. I think everything that I love about the Misfits and that gets across what they were trying to do is in that song. Yeah. The melodies, the horror movies, the energy, it's all there. That's
another favorite track of mine. However, I'm going to insert myself into this. Mine would be, I would use Astro Zombies. I would use Astro personally. But Night of the Living Dead, an all-time personal favorite of mine.
I think Skulls would also work in that same way.
Skulls would work. What do you have a favorite version of Night of the Living Dead in particular?
Yeah, I like the one. I actually like the one on Astro. I like the one on Walk Among Us. I think the best because the production on the 7-inch is really a little rough.
It's a little rough. Okay, so that was okay. So that's Misfits.
Or the 12 hits version.
Personally, the 12 hits version I think is the definitive.
I mean, the one I have on my mix is the one from Walk Among Us because obviously 12 hits isn't on there. But
right.
Yeah. If I could pick any one, it would be the 12 hits version.
What about 5 Samhain songs?
Okay, I don't have those listed, so I'm going to do that off the top of my head. I would probably go with The Shift. I'd probably go with Mother of Mercy.
Okay, great song.
Black Dream.
Yeah.
Probably maybe. This is harder. Unholy Passion.
Okay.
And maybe To Walk the Night.
Oh, To Walk the Night, man. We were talking the other episode. I want to hear a Mother of Mercy. Oh no, I think we spoke about this, or maybe it was someone else, about hearing a band like Soft Cell or something do Mother of Mercy or To Walk the Night. That would be interesting. That'd be very interesting. Okay, give me 5 Danzig tracks.
My definite 2 favorites above all the others are Her Black Wings and She Rides.
Okay.
Those 2 are like way, I could name them off the top of my head. Beyond that, it's a little harder for me to decide which would be next. There would be a lot. That's hard. Just because I haven't listened to them in a long time. Uh-huh. I've actually, since I've been listening to your shows, there's a plug for your show. It's getting me stuff. I have to say this. I'll be pretty short. After about 94,
Yeah.
I saw that was the last time I saw Danzig live. I saw him at Jones Beach with Metallica. I kind of lost interest for a while. I think the last album I bought was Black Acid Devil, and I kind of like, I just stopped listening to. I mean, I kept on with Misfits stuff when it would come out, but I wasn't following his current stuff.
Right.
And kind of getting involved with your, posting these things on YouTube and then watching your shows or whatever. It's kind of sparked a renaissance for me, a resurgence of my interest in him. So I downloaded all of the stuff that I had missed, and I was listening to a lot of it the last few days. And I actually really enjoyed, what I loved? I loved one of the tracks on the Elvis album.
Oh, I love that whole Elvis album, dude.
It's really good.
It's which one?
His version of Pocket Full of Rainbows was freaking.
Let me tell you something. I said this. I did a whole review episode of Danzig Sings Elvis. I went track by track, and I'm not an Elvis guy at all. Like, I'm not. Like, I like Elvis. Like, Elvis, I respect Elvis, but Elvis is not like I'm Beatles. I'm a Beatles guy, but not that you have to be either or. But I'll say this. I listened to the Danzig Sings Elvis, which very polarizing. A lot of people did not like. And I came to the conclusion that this is the best thing that he's recorded in like 25 years. Number one. Number two, Pocket Full of Rainbows is the best track. It's the most punk rock track in the sense that this is mother effing Danzig being like, I want to sing about some mother effing Pocket Full of Rainbows. And you know what I'm saying? And three, it feels like Rocky VI, man. It feels like it feels like swinging for the fences one last time. I'm going to go balls to the wall. I kind of like the vulnerability that you get from Danzig when he sings Elvis songs because they feel very personal. His performances are very personal. Sure. It's very introspective what he's talking about. Like, I feel like he's picking these songs because they mean something to him in his life at some way, shape, or form. He's never going to tell you about, his first heartbreak, but he'll sing about it with Elvis, and that's how he's going to tell you. So he doesn't need to write a biography. He's just going to put out an Elvis record and call it a day. And that's great, great stuff. So I like that you picked that. That's cool.
Then you wanted 5, so I'd probably pick the other ones. I'd probably pick Sistinas, maybe.
Oh,
and I'd probably go for the last one, maybe Soul on Fire.
Great song. That was good. I commend you. That was very impromptu and well done. It's the Marty says, that was awesome. Thanks for sharing those letters. And Chris Spahn says he mentions the Always on My Mind cover was also really good. I agree. And again, I think Uncle Glenn, whatever you do, I'll look forward to it. I'm looking forward to your vampire movie for sure. I'm sure it will be like the Room level fun. But if he's going to keep making music, I really think that he's got to put all this stuff down. I mean, he could do whatever he wants. He's Danzig, but if he's going to keep doing stuff, maybe do more stuff that's ballsy, like the Danzig Sings Elvis stuff. I thought that was so ballsy to put out after everything that he's done. So, and if he never puts out another thing again, I'll be very happy with the Danzig Sings Elvis record being the final thing in his discography.
I agree.
So, Greg, I got to tell you, this was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'll be keeping an eye out for your channel, and if I ever do anything like music related, like if it's a game show or something on my thing, or I need people, I will definitely keep you in the back of my mind for something like that, because you are just super well-versed and well-knowledged. And I hope that our paths do cross in a non-pandemic world, because I'd love to buy you a slice of pizza.
That would be awesome, Jeff.
Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Please like, subscribe, share. Guys, check out the new t-shirt. You can't have another cheeseburger. Remember, do you want to be the same guy that has every Misfits shirt? No. Be the guy that has the Misfits shirt that no one's expecting, but the true fan knows about why you can't have another cheeseburger, right? So whoever sees that is going to think you're the coolest guy in the room. So check out that shirt. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as we always say on the show, peace. Oh, whoops. Wait, sorry, I botched that.